He sees the fracture before anyone names it. The Omnitrix screams in bands of green and black, its failsafe painting a map of endings from one cosmos to another. Professor Paradox offers probabilities like prayers. If the breach grows, both timelines drown. Ben chooses to jump, to plug the wound with everything he can become, even if the lattice cooks his own DNA. He rewires the null void projector into the Omnitrix core, speaks execute, and the world tears open. A sky above Vigilus peels into green fire and falling glass. Practice sirens blare across Mega Borealis, then crackle into the real thing as Vox towers cascade absolution rites over roads jammed with hab crawlers. A manufactorum worker named Lisa holds her son's face in both hands and lies. It's just a drill. On Cathedral Spire 12, a sister's choir turns from hymns to triage, hauling crates of coagulants past stained glass that shows a saint turning away a dragon. A senior astropath stiffens as a pressure wave hits the soul, and every candle in the choir pit bends toward the breach like grass. The first body through is a comet that grows arms. 4 of them. He has red skin and corded muscle and iron bracelets that hum with borrowed physics. He hits the air with a sound like a cathedral bell dropped down a mine shaft, and things that were falling stop falling. A transit gondola shears its rail and arcs toward a market square. He catches it underhand, grunts, and the stone under his feet spiderwebs. Civilians freeze, then run. A Voxcaster slaps his set. Repeat. Unknown Xenos mass has intercepted East Line Gondola 7. Not a hostile act. The words Unknown Xenos ride out over a city that has learned what that means, and none of it good. The 4-armed giant leans forward, sets the gondola on a maintenance terrace, with a care that doesn't match his size. Metal screams until it doesn't, and the mass settles in a rain of rivets. His bracelets glow. The red bleeds away, plates of green light refract, and he collapses into a human-sized silhouette that doesn't stay. The figure flares to a furnace. Heat blossoms into a humanoid star with eyes like kiln doors. A dozen falling promethium canisters find themselves nude in the air and then surrounded by curved sheets of glass as the thing melts sand out of the street to catch them. The city breathes on that miracle and coughs on the cost. Heat waves race along alleys and pop water mains. Sister hospitalers in white and red drag cots back from a spreading slick. Back, back, one calls, and then flinches as the living fire cuts a seam in the pavement, letting a geyser crack the hardpan and cool the flow. He is ash and glare and focus. He steps into a spill of promethium like it's rain and drinks it with controlled burn, metering out the oxygen with patience that looks like reverence. Power grinds through him and into the Omnitrix core. The green dial under his chest plate flickers, crackles, and spits. A new shadow falls. The tear he punched through brings other things. Black armored drop pods, shaped like coffin bullets, fall from a storm that wears faces. The first slams into the plaza and opens like a jaw. Black legionaries step out in oil-sheen plates, eyes red behind horned brow guards, bolters held like verdicts. Heatblast turns. He lifts his palm and lets out a lance of sun. The lead traitor's pauldron glows white, then vaporizes. Then the man behind it goes down in a rope of screaming metal. The next 3 fire. The first bolt chews through his shoulder flame and shocks the plasma into a dirty sputter. Heat collapses into his core, and the green dial on his chest hammers a warning he feels in his teeth. Target the warp flame, growls the warpsmith through Vox distortion, chains snaking from his mechadendrites. Noctilith Crown elements deploy. Cage the gate. 4 Arms is back before anyone registers the shift. A red colossus ripping a lamppost out of the street and sweeping a trio of traitors into a sculpture of crumpled ceramite. He plants a foot braced as a hellbrute crashes through a pilgrim statue and roars stitched machine hate. 4 arms meets it head-on. 2 hands to the fist, 2 to the wrist, legs shuddering as he drags the abomination sideways. Pilgrims scatter, one reciting a broken litany, one snapping a pict of the red giant who catches their deaths and holds them like chairs. The green dial spits sparks again. The giant's teeth bare in concentration. He pivots and slams the hellbrute into a basalt column, punches its chest plate twice, then twice again, each blow precise. Not a brawler's flail, but a crane stroke. Cables pop. The sarcophagus within wheezes a name that no one living remembers. The giant hears the relic of a man's agony and frowns like a priest hearing a confession too late. He flickers. He doesn't want to, but the Omnitrix makes a call. The giant drops to a sliver of silhouette, then erupts into spears of translucent green. Diamondhead. Light shards into facets. The plaza becomes a field of blades and terraces as he extrudes walls from his hands, interlocking hexagons that catch bolter shells and turn them into sparkling rain. He runs forward, skating on a path he lays as he goes, a moving battlement growing heads for the Hydra of war. By the throne, whispers a field vox operator, as his squad fits behind a new wall that wasn't there a second ago. By the throne, it made cover. On a balcony above, Lord Governor Helvar Kest watches through a cracked lumen glass window, face grey in the furnace light. He's already shed the gold coat and wears a flak vest over his shirt. "Line me to the cathedral net," he snaps. "This is Governor Kest. Whatever that thing is, it's saving our people. All PDF axes anchor on those crystalline lines. Feed it a corridor. Keep it alive. Down in the vaults of the Basilica of the Saint who turns away dragons, an Inquisitor closes his eyes until the voices of the city become a map. Kael Severin, Ordo Xenos, a name spoken with respect and irritation in equal parts by those who know him. He flicks dust off the cover of a field grimoire and looks at the Auspex feed that tells him a Xenos triad, not logged in any of his bestiaries, is building walls and saving citizens in the same breath. Heretic Legion and an unknown alien landing in Symphony, he says to the acolyte beside him. This is either providence or choreography. Load the null rods. We will not be the fools of someone else's play. Diamondhead plants both feet, then both hands. A dome rattles up and locks around a clinic full of screaming, just in time for a havoc team to hose the square with heavy bolter fire. Shots spark, glance, bury themselves, sink slowly like fat into glass that hardens as it eats. He opens a narrow hatch and waves a nurse out with 3 cots. She looks at him like a person looks at a relic. "Thank you," she says, as if to a holy shard. He turns his head to the green that pulses at his sternum, a heartbeat inside a heartbeat. He can feel the cost. The warp-saturated air doesn't like to conduct clean, and each structure he throws is constantly warping, trying to grow wrong. He corrals the wrongness, keeps the edges straight, and feels a headache rise like a tide. A warpsmith's chains snake around his arm and bite with fused teeth. Voltage rakes across crystal, crawling toward the core. Diamondhead jerks and punches his own forearm, breaking it off at the elbow. It falls, chains and all, shattering into knives that litter the ground. He grows a new arm out of the stump in a burst of shards that rearrange like a choir-shifting key. The hellbrute gets back up. The red giant is gone. The crystal warrior is busy. The fire is a memory sucked into the Omnitrix like breath into lungs. The machine man charges with a pace that used to be human. Diamondhead plants a buttress. The hellbrute plows into it, then tears out a wedge and throws it like a spear. It pins a PDF sergeant to the wall through his flak vest, and his heart stops under the crystal, quick as a switch. Ben knows that. He always knows. The Omnitrix feeds him body counts. He tries not to count. He sprints, pours himself into a ramp, jumps clear, and changes mid-air. Heatblast lands on the Hellbrute like a blessing and a curse. He holds his hands at either side of its sarcophagus and pours in sun until the panel glows translucent. He sees a face in there, a skull locked in amber, welding its scream to the machines. He speaks, and his voice sounds like a side wind through a kiln. "Not your fault," he says. "I'm sorry." He peels. He shapes flame into the thinness of a scalpel and cuts the locks one at a time, while taking hits from Reaper autocannons and holding his own fire away from the pilots of a shuttle trying to cycle through the plaza. The locks snap. The panel falls. He steps back and lets cooling air hit ancient flesh. The thing inside reaches up with the kind of grateful moan that lives in hospital wards just before dawn. It dies with that sound on the air. The Hellbrute shudders and slumps like a man whose fever breaks. He bows once to the body within. He does not bow to the machine. The green flickers hard. The Omnitrix gives him a staccato of failure notes like a geish of batteries. He staggers, heat lancing through him, then pulls in, surrenders the flame, and wards the core with a thought that feels like a prayer. Not yet. On Tower Dorsal 7, a sorcerer of the Black Legion steps into view with his staff raised, a ram skull laughing on its tip. He scrawls sigils with cheap warp that the air eats like sugar. "Come see," he intones to the sky. "Come feast." The tear in the world answers. Lesser demons slip out like misfiled knives. A river of red mouths flows down the building's face. The sorcerer grins and cuts his palm with a ring. "Fan," he whispers. "Fan little sparks." Heatblast feels those mouths try to make themselves out of him. Fire has shape here. Fire tries to be faces. He keeps it all inside, the way a singer keeps a note and tastes copper as he clamps the door on 100 laughing tongues. Forearms is back. He doesn't roar so much as stamp on the square until the echo is his. He rips a grav cable off a collapsed crane and whips it like a flail. The chain wraps around a tower's knee, and he pulls. The tower leans. A balcony full of demons remembers gravity, and then gravity remembers them. They don't so much splatter as unwrite, going back to ideas before they landed. "Governor," says a Vox Adept. "Unknown Xenos shows target discrimination and mercy patterns. He saved a corpse from a machine so a soul could go free." Kest watches the feed and pushes past the staffer to a balcony. He makes a sign with his fingers that is a prayer and an oath. "Then give him a name we can say," he says. "I won't have my troops calling him it while he holds my city." 3 signatures, 1 operator, says a tech priest, reading auspex like entrails. "This is not a pack. This is a tool." "Even so," Kest says. "Call sign Triarch." "No, that's too proud." "Call him Lantern." "No." "He shines and he holds." "Bastion." "Call him Bastion." The name runs, and men die under it with straight backs instead of bailed ones. Diamondhead hears it, and for a split second, he allows himself something like a smile. Then a havoc shell ticks in the air across his right cheek. He turns his head. The shell grazes, buries itself in a wall, becomes a flower of broken glass. He grows a visor down over his eyes and makes a hole through it for the world. He also sees the crown. Black pylons are arriving by Gravskiff and Demon Road at the edges of the plaza. Night black obelisks, carved with wrong math that makes the air thin. The Warpsmith's crew slams them into sockets on a hex grid. That isn't there until you look and see. It always was. The pylons hum, and the hum has a taste. Noctilith Crown elements, breathes an acolyte in the Basilica vault. Inquisitor Severin's hand tightens on the copy of Ars Xenologica. They mean to set a gate. They mean to make this place a hinge. He ascends the stair with his retinue. He's in plain armor that wears authority without liking it. A rosette slung low like a star. He steps onto the cathedral nave and sees the red giant swap to a green crystal man, then a man of fire, then back again. Each shift, a cost paid out of something finite. He sees the warpsmith extend his mechadendrites toward the Omnitrix, like a man reaching for an apple that will make him a god. Severin raises his hand and a blank steps to his side. The air around the woman sours into silence. The warp recedes like a dog that knows the boot. Diamondhead stumbles. Heatblast would die in that silence. 4 arms can move. The rosette glints. "Xenos," Severin calls, voice amplified by the Basilica Choir's stolen vox line. "Turn and acknowledge the Holy Ordos." 4 arms does. He is a head higher than the balcony when he stands in front of it. He has promethium ash in the creases of his knuckles and the fine dust of someone else's tomb on his shoulders. He squints up and says, "People first, then talk." Severin almost smiles. That is a human answer. "Because people are people," the giant says. "Noctilith is almost ready. Help me break the spacing." "Governor," Severin says, turning to Kest, who has found his way to the nave in his shirt sleeves, breathless but upright. "We are aiding an unknown Xanos in live combat." "We are aiding a rescuer," Kest says. "And he is aiding us." He leans over the rail. "Bastion, my axes are yours." Across the square, a warpsmith laughs into his vox. "Raise the pylons. Crown to stage 2. Lash the flame to the gate." The pylons wake. The hum turns into a choir of basement organ pipes. The air begins to climb itself into a spiral. Diamondhead tastes iron, then broader iron, the kind that lives in blood and magnets and swords. Heatblast's core pulls like a tide going the wrong way. He grits what in this body are made of light and dares the Omnitrix to give him 10 more seconds. He gets 5. He uses 4 to cast a spray of diamond chaff into the rising column, so the warp wind grabs shards instead of citizens. The last second he uses to jump and slam a crystalline pike into the ground, shaping the plaza's own bedrock into a counter-helix. For a heartbeat, stone and night sing against each other like 2 instruments trying to play one note. The basilica's bells start ringing themselves. Sister Superior Andara of the Armated Lady slams the switch on the quad autocannon built into the nave rib, and sanctified rounds stitch the warpsmith's crew with a fire that carries little prayers like hitchhikers. Kest roars something about flanking lanes and bleeds out of the arm and doesn't notice. Severin points, and the blank moves to stand between Heatblast and the crown. The living fire shudders like a candle in a breathless room but burns, focused, point by point, turning the carved lines on one pylon into glass that fractures and falls. The warpsmith loses patience. He stamps and is suddenly more machine than man, turning his attention to the Omnitrix dial itself with a gaze like a drill. "I can unmake you," he tells it. "I can pattern you and add you to the choir." 4 arms doesn't ask what that means. He rips a dead havoc gun off its mount, swings it by the barrel, and throws it end over end. It hits the warpsmith broadside and takes him off his feet into a pylon. The pylon cracks, keens, and bleeds shadow. The choir wobbles. A vox car slashes across all channels, cutting in even on the warlord frequencies. This is Fleet Admiral Tullius Var, Battlefleet Vigilus on Vector. Enemy strength estimated at a regiment scale traitor marines, plus demon engine support. Ground element designate, Bastion. Hold your anchor. All batteries. Target those black spires. If you dent them, you save us. The first lance strike comes down like a finger from a god, too tired to push hard. It still tears a pylon's head clean off. The crown stutters. The storm above ripples and shows for an instant the stars behind, cold and beautiful as truth. Again, Severin says into the net. Again, keep that window open. Heatblast tilts his head back and swallows that starlight. It hurts. It tastes like metal and midnight and the lives of sailors who never saw land again. And it hurts. He eats it anyway and turns it into a spear that slams into the next pylon's seam. The seam opens. The pylon groans like a living thing. Diamondhead drives a wedge into the gap and twists. Stone screams. The pylon dies. Bolt of fire thickens. A Black Legion champion in a crest of flayed skin charges across a bridge of skulls that wasn't there a second ago. 4 arms meets him in the middle, like 2 doctrines colliding. One of the giant's left arms catches the chain axe at the haft. His right drives a fist into the champion's gut plate. His upper hands clap the helm like a bell. The champion drops to a knee. The giant picks him up and throws him over the rail. He does not look over the edge to see the landing. Heatblast's fire snags on a scrap of warp wind and tries to be a face again. He does not let it. He folds in, clicks the dial with a motion that would be a confession anywhere else, and comes out green and hard and patient. Diamondhead shapes stairs under a stream of fleeing workers and throws a canopy over them that turns auto cannon fire into glitter. On those steps, Lisa drags 3 children and a toolbox and decides that if she lives, she will never again flinch when a siren sings. A lictor lands behind her. No one on Vigilus says the word tyrannid without putting it between other words to slow it down. The lictor comes out of the shadow of a machine that is supposed to be dead and shows its tongue to the back of Lisa's neck and thinks about how fast fear travels through meat. Diamondhead's head snaps around. He puts a wall there that was not there, and the lictor's scythe goes into crystal instead of the woman. He turns, throws his hand, and an obelisk grows out of the floor through the lictor and into the ceiling. It twitches 3 times and stops. Across Vox, someone swears in 6 dialects. New contact, sighs Severin. Kraken or Leviathan splinter. Of course they come to the smell. The warpsmith laughs like an engine seizing. Witness the crown, he says, and slams a control stud with a mechadendrite. The remaining pylons cough shadow and reorient their mouths toward the sky. The storm tightens like a fist. A hole opens into a place where everything is teeth. Ben pushes the dial and feels, for the first time today, nothing happen. He gets 2 beats of silence in his head where the Omnitrix usually sings. He sees the dial blink green, black, green, trying to decide between fire and crystal, and fail to be either. He is skin and bone and breath, and a glare of green on his wrist, all at once in the middle of a plaza that believes in him because it needs to. The blanks field brushes him like a cold hand loud. Severin sees his flinch and gestures the woman aside half a pace. Your device, Severin says, voice level. Does it hunger or hate? Tell me the cost so I can decide what to pay. It's a keyring, Ben says, half a laugh shoved through pain. And a promise. It costs time, and it hates nothing. Good, Severin says. Hate is the enemy's heir. Screeches slice the world. Tyrannid gargoyles swarm in like thought-taking wing. Winged synapse beasts herd them with pulses you feel in the molars. Black Legion havocs turn and begin cutting them down with professional boredom. The gargoyles don't care. They're not built for care. Kest points in a way that has saved and killed men. Pull those refugees into the basilica. Get the wounded under the galleries. Artillery battery Hadar. Range the eastern pylons. Bastion. Hit the seams when they glow. Diamondhead bows his head without sarcasm. Yes, Governor. He takes a step, and the plaza lurches. A shadow falls that isn't a cloud. A hive ship might not fit in a sky, but it can try. The storm above, the one the crown is strangling, goes black as the moon's. A tongue of bioplasma licks out a kilometre away and takes a hat block off at the ankles. Plan, Severin says, already moving toward the nave aisle, as if the cathedral were a command bunker. Because today it is. We must not fight 4 wars with 3 hands. Governor Kest, your PDF anchors the civilians. Bastion, Ben, he says without thinking. Severin looks at him for a long sliver of time and nods once. Ben, you'll be my knife against the crown. I will throw saints and sailors at the rest. The Omnitrix coughs up a green light, like a sick man coughing up hope. The dial warms. He slaps it and comes out red, then bright, then green, then red again, flickering as the crown snarls at his lattice. He grabs a shard of himself and uses it as a gauntlet. He becomes heat only at the fingers, crystal at the bone, strength in the wrist, a compromise that would have made someone else proud. He doesn't know who. The warpsmith sees that and wants it. All pylons, he hisses. Rotate to harmonic bleed. Strip his patterns. We'll wear him like a jacket. A sister in black power armor slams a relic blade into the floor between Ben and the warpsmith. The blade hums with a litany that looks like it should hurt boulders. Back, Canoness Alessa calls, helm bare, hair white, eyes the color of smoke. This is a house of the God Emperor. You do not enter without blessing. Ben glances up at her. She glances down at him. For an instant, the old woman and the boy, the saint and the stranger, share an understanding so simple, it is almost a sin for its lack of ornament. Save them. He throws himself at the nearest pylon seam. He has 4 arms when he hits it, because breaking rocks is honest work. He wraps all 4 hands around the thin cracked diamond head left and pulls. It holds like a tooth. He adjusts, digs with crystal fingers that sprout from red hands, lives inside both shapes, and finds purchase. He pulls again, not with rage but with grace. The way you open heavy doors in temples so that they do not scream. The seam yields, the pylon buckles. Warpsmith's curse in machine cant. Heatblast flares in his throat, throws a line of precise flame into the buckling seam without catching any of the pilgrims huddled 3 meters away. The line is surgical. The pylon opens like a book, and the letters on its pages fall out as ash. The crown reels. The storm brightens. Beam lances pour from orbit like spears hurled by very careful giants, seeking those open seams. 2 more pylons die. Hold, Severin says into his pin-snapped vox. Calm not as affect but as tool. Do not pursue. Anchor on the nave. Choirs. Sing. Sing loud. They sing. Discordant, terrified. Out of practice of war songs maybe. But loud. The warp does not like the tune. It backs away from the door like a drunk deciding the pub is closed. Shadow at the edge of the plaza moves like math. A tall figure built of ribs and a pinion slides out from behind a piece of sun. It does not belong to the Black Legion or the Swarm. It belongs to another epoch. Metal like night. Eyes like money complicated by death. New contact, the tech priest murmurs. Voice a taser in a library. Xenos pattern. Necron. Subtype. Cryptek. Possible objectives. Harvest, study, nullify. The Cryptek watches the way the Omnitrix flickers and finds a new hunger. Curious, it says in a voice like an old machine thinking. It does not attack. It sets small black cones around itself with the patience of a gardener and plants silence in the soil. Ben feels that silence comb his transformations like fingers through hair. 4 arms coughs. Heatblast gutters. Diamondhead loses one facet's exact angle. None of it breaks, Not yet, but the cost is climbing. He feels the dial heating against his sternum, a half-turn punishment. We cannot hold this square and fight a crown, a swarm, a warband, and a harvester, Severin says, crisp, as if ordering a drink. Governor, cut free any unit not committed to civilian protection. Admiral, I need your lances walking the crown grid until it falls. Ben, knife, Ben says, already moving, teeth clenched. Knife, Severin agrees. Cut. Codex note. Noctilith crowns, made of warp-drinking blackstone. Deform reality like kilns deform clay. Break the lattice with shaped force or sanctified precision. Never brute fire alone. A gargoyle hits Ben's shoulder and skids along crystal flesh, trying to find something soft. 4 arms finds it first. He catches the insect by the throat, snaps the bone that pretends to be metal, and throws the corpse back into its flock as a signal. Not food. The warpsmith tries again to choke Heatblast with the crown's harmonics, but the sisters' songs have shifted the key. The harmonics wobble. Heatblast hits the pylon base with a short, mean blast that has nothing poetic about it. Stone leaves. Air returns. Ben breathes. Severin keeps pace beside the Canoness and the Governor. A strange trinity that does not rear or break in the trace smoke. You understand, he says to Kest, that when this is over, the question of the Xenos will not be a parade decision. Assuming there is an over, Kest says, then sets his jaw. If there is, I will answer for what I did. I will answer for who I kept alive. And I will judge, Severin says without threat. Then live, the Canoness says, dry as old wine. So you can. They reach the last pylon standing. It has learned from the others. It hides its seam behind constructs of frozen shadow and the legs of a demon engine that kneels to shelter it like a hound, shielding a bone. The engine is a scorpion made of screaming. It has a face that has many faces inside it, all of them knowing your name. Ben tries to be fire to run up the engine's spine and finds a blank field brushing him. He looks up just in time to see the woman's eyes, flat and kind as stone. Apologies, she says, and steps left. I am a hammer with no subtlety. It's okay, he says, and becomes what is not stopped by her. Mass and will, red and ready. 4 arms hits the engine low, lives, sets, and turns. The thing flips, a cathedral's worth of blasphemy upside down for the length of a breath, and crashes onto its back in a hail of broken hymnals. Diamondhead flows over it, grows spikes that find joints, twists. Heatblast takes a breath that is mostly pain and gives the joints a kiss of heat, just enough to let crystal enter, expand, crack. The engine dies with a sigh, like a stage curtain falling. The pylon behind it shudders. Now, Severin says, Ben does what he came to do. He sets his hands into the seam like a stonecutter baptizing his fingers. He pulls, and the seam, exhausted, relents. The pylon splits. The crown silences. The storm releases the light it was holding like a breath held too long. Above, the hive ship turns a slow, disinterested face. Without the crown, its vector wobbles. Bioplasma vents in a line that does not intersect the basilica. For the first time today, the city believes in later. A whisper passes through the crowd, huddled under Diamondhead's canopy. Someone says, Bastion. Someone says, Saint. Someone says nothing, but their hands remember how to unclench. Severin's vox ticks in his ear. Admiral Var to ground. We see your work. The crown is gone. New contacts. Phase signatures increasing across the underhive. Something waking, something old. Be advised. Hostile synergy is degrading. They will trip over each other. Exploit. Kest nods like a man swallowing glass. We will. Bastion. Ben. He turns, green dial dim. crystals sloughing into sand that looks like salt tears on the stones. I'm here. That was the incursion. This is the war, Kest says. You bought us time. Now we need a plan. Ben tastes copper again. Heatblast would burn it away. Diamondhead would hide it. Four Arms would spit it on the ground and call it fuel. He does none of those things. He nods, and the green pulsing at his chest said, he has maybe 2 minutes of clean shift before the crown's aftertaste and the blank's edge drag him into human exhaustion. The plan, Severin says and points at the basilica floor as if it were a map, is that you hit where doctrine cannot. We will put you in position. We will trust you until we cannot. You will accept that line. Ben meets the Inquisitor's eyes. They have not softened. They do not harden. They simply remain the eyes of a man who has killed for less and will live to do right more than once. I accept the line, Ben says. And you, Severin says, turning to Canoness Alessa. We'll put prayers where I put orders. We need both. The Tyranids will not respect a broken hymn. The Necron below will not care, but humans will. I will sing, Alessa says, and smiles in a way that has lost friends on battlefields, and I will make them sing. The warpsmith drags himself out from under a broken pylon with 2 mecha dendrites, half his chest off, and leers, blood coughing in machine oil. You think it ends with a crown, he says. It begins with a lattice. We will take your lattice, boy. We will put God in it and wear new teeth. Ben takes a step, but Severin's hand is on his shoulder. Debate later. Work now. The basilica becomes a command post with ritual edges. Candles are shoved aside by cogitators. Slate prayers hang next to vox charts. The choir loft fills with wounded and cherubs carrying antiseptics. The big doors stay open. Kest leans over a table while an adept draws lines in chalk. First wave down, he says. Voice tired, eyes bright. Second wave is smarter. It always is. Severin's acolyte unrolls a parchment painted over with a schematic of the underhive. Necron tomb grid here. If a Cryptek is already upstairs, expect control nodes. Their null fields will make your flame cough and your crystal crack. Their phase weapons ignore doors. I can be strong without fire, Ben says. I can be hard without crystal. I can be patient. I can be many things. And that is why you will live longer than a saint, Alessa says. But you must choose with care. Indiscriminate miracles breed relic cults, and those eat cities as surely as swarms. He nods. He knows. He has seen people build gods out of men, because men got lucky. He has seen what happens after. The Admiral's voice returns. Battle fleet will prosecute swarm vanguard. We'll keep the sky rude. But I won't lie to you, ground. The hive ship is a cathedral of knives. It will preach whether we like it or not. Then we preach louder, Alessa says, and her sister laughs once in a way that is almost obscene and completely holy. Ben looks at the green under his sternum. He touches it with a careful finger as if feeling a baby's fever. You with me, he murmurs, not to the Inquisitor, not to the Governor, not to the Canoness, but to something quieter. The dial's light steadies, and for a moment the air around it smells like rain on hot asphalt. They move. PDF platoons peel off, anchored by ad hoc bastions of diamond built without flourish. Sisters drag heavy weapons into the nave-head. Archers. Severin's retinue checks their null rods for cracks and their wheels for holes. Kest pulls on a battered carapace vest and signs an order freeing the prison barracks of non-heretic labourers to carry stretchers. In the galleries, a boy falls asleep finally, with a glow still on his face from watching a man of fire not burn him. Ben runs toward the underhive lift that smells like rust and incense and blood. His 4 arms on the drop, because steel cable sings in that shape, and he is faster by 1 stride and safer by 2. He launches down shaft walls and does not look at his hands. because the last Hellbrute sarcophagus had a face he will not forgive himself for seeing. At Shaft's base, the air is different. City smells up top. Here it's bone and ancient lightning. Lights fail. Diamondhead returns with a shiver, body throwing its own illumination, as if embarrassed by dark. He makes a blade from his palm and cuts a door that the Necrons fashioned to teach patience. It was waiting for someone to scrape at it with a million little attempts. He cheats and opens it in a minute. The Cryptek waits beyond, not alone. Scarabs build a carpet that moves. Warriors stand like arguments you cannot win with passion. The Cryptek regards Ben and tilts his head with curiosity that is not cruel, only absolute. Test, it says. 4 arms would answer with mass. Heatblast with contempt. Diamondhead answers with geometry. Ben holds his hands out and grows not walls, but a set of nested arches that force the Necron fire to splay where he wants it, then channels that fire into a gutter he shapes toward a sump. The sump hisses. The Necron fire becomes the city's cough. Adaptive, the Cryptek says. Valence malleable. Pattern anchored to a core. Acquisition recommended. Denied, Severin says over the vox in Ben's Oashir. Not politely. Ben steps forward. The Cryptek plants another cone of silence and watches the sparks in Ben's lattice twist. Fire resists. Crystal sulks. Strength stands firm but stupid. He chooses anyway, because the city above needs the door below closed. He chooses 4 arms and feels himself dull in the cone. Not dumb exactly, but thick. He makes that thickness a virtue. He picks up a Necron like a sack of flour and throws him into 3 others like a rude prayer. Crystal needles stab up under the carpet of scarabs, pinning rows like insects on a professor's board. Heatblast wakes long enough to breathe a line across the floor that turns the trapped into solid lumps. The Omnitrix screams again. The dial goes hot. He hears the click. That means later he will pay for this. Severin watches his vitals scatter on a slate. Cost vector identified, he says to himself. The word's a catechism. Warp saturation plus null interference destabilizes the lattice. Fuel is not promethium. Fuel is time. Kest is still in the nave when a PDF lieutenant drags him to the balcony by the sleeve. Governor, she says, voice an octave too high. You have to see this. He looks. The hive ship's shadow swells. Something like a tongue probes the lower atmosphere and tastes the city for fear. He tastes his own. He swallows it. Admiral Var, he says into the net. Remind that thing we have teeth. Copy, the Admiral says. And then the sky writes his answer in lines of light. Ben breaks through to a central chamber full of machines that look like they forgot their own names and are ashamed. The Cryptek floats backward like a spider who has built a web that it knows will not hold. Wound channels, it says, measuring. Entropy tolerance. Pain, Ben says, because words are weapons too, is not a unit. The Cryptek aims a staff. A fountain of black light lances and splits into 3 slicing planes, reality hinged into razor. Diamondhead slams a shield into one plane and watches it cut through crystal like a paper letter opener through folded silk. He screams, not with the voice of the alien, but with his. The plane hits the Omnitrix dial and makes it ring. He falls. He is human again in air that wants to kill humans, with a dial that is hot and a chest that feels suddenly very mortal. He puts his hand on the dial to protect it, as if it were a bruise on a friend. The Cryptek pauses. Curious, it says again. And this time, there is something like respect in the dead machine voice. Operator substrate, not disposable. A scarab skitters toward Ben's throat. He catches it by reflex, crushes it, cuts his palm, and smears blood on the dial. The green flares like a pulse catching again. He hears Paradox's laugh in the back of his head. Or maybe it's a memory of someone else's gallows humor. He slaps the dial and is heat where there is no oxygen, yet heat anyway, because sometimes will is chemistry. He burns the planes by burning the math they carry, which is poetry uttered in a kiln. And he walks forward with his shoulders set and his eyes like coals in a trusted hearth. And the Cryptek raises a hand and makes a note somewhere in his head that this thing is not how the galaxy usually goes. On the nave balcony, Severin watches a distant pic of underhive heat blooming, and he puts a hand on the rosette unconsciously, not to swear, but to think. Praise perhaps, he says, and does not say to whom. Kest hears him. You can tell your masters that I welcomed a Xenos into my basilica, he says, and if they shoot me for it tomorrow, at least they'll have a living city to do it in. Do not be so eager to be martyred, Alessa says without looking at him. The Emperor has saints. He needs governors. A gargoyle dives at the balcony. A sister drops it with a melter gun held like a candelabra. The corpse slaps the stone and slides off into the aisle, where a child laughs once because he thinks the sound is funny. Then he hides his face in his mother's skirt and stops laughing because he remembers. Underhive. Heatblast kisses the Cryptek's cones of silence with little blades of flame, not enough to break them, enough to map their edges. He makes a path through quiet, so his own noise can go where it wants. He reaches the core machine and sees the control obelisk that stitches this tomb to others. He knows a switch when he sees one. He also knows a trap. He steps back, becomes Diamondhead with a wince, like standing on a bad ankle, grows a hand through the obelisk, and finds nothing human inside. He breaks it anyway, because sometimes grace looks like vandalism. The underhive sighs, lights flicker. Somewhere far away, a Necron opens its eyes and sees darkness, and the darkness is its own, and that is not the plan. The Cryptek's head tilts again, a caged curiosity. You refuse optimality, it says. You choose inefficient paths to preserve outlier variables, flesh, child, song. It almost sounds fascinated. You are dangerous. I'm trying to be useful, Ben says, and holds the shape until the dial tells him to stop with a final, undeniable click. He staggers, human again. He hears the city breathing above him, and he hears the storm thinning, and he hears an incoming tidal noise that is not weather at all but plan. He puts his hand to the Omnitrix, feels it hot and angry and alive. He thinks of cost like tally marks he cannot see, but knows are there. From the nave, Severin reads the sign of that cost in the tremor in the boy's hand on the pict. First breach sealed, he says to Kest and Alessa. Enemy escalation will not accept that wound. They will bring a foe we cannot treat like a machine. They always do, Alessa says, and we always sing. Ben walks back up the shaft with a gait that says he's still hiding the hurt from himself. As he climbs, the sky over Vigilus changes color with intent. The warpsmith pins his chest closed with a broken blade and hisses oaths into a busted vox. The hive ship reorients its moor. The Cryptek steps back into a mind he carries with him like a library. On the balcony, Lisa holds her son and looks at the man who was fire and crystal and a tower, and now is just a boy. She thinks, for reasons she would never admit, that this is the most frightening shape. He stops a moment at the gallery rail and looks down into 1,000 faces and 100 candles wobbling in the moving air. We bought time, he says, to Severin, to Kest, to Alessa, to the city, to the thing in the dial. Now we use it. Smoke thins to a workable haze. The plaza holds. The crown is rubble. The hive ship is angling away from the basilica's heart, and the Necron hum underfoot is a sulk instead of a song. Ben rolls his shoulders once and feels the dial cool enough to trust again. The first victory begins like sanitation and ends like art. He shapes diamond not into grand walls but into gutters, baffles, and quiet catches. He lays transparent lips along roof lines so shrapnel slides into them and stays. He anneals edges with tiny breaths of heatblast heat so broken glass turns smooth and useless. 4 arms lifts collapsed architraves just high enough for Medici crews to snake gurneys through. He never throws a single piece of stone unless it cannot become shelter. Canoness Alessa watches him correct a ricochet path with a palm-sized husk of crystal. "He is learning our city," she says to Severin, voice soft so it won't startle anyone. "He is learning how not to hurt it." "Good," Severin says, and marks a line through a strat slate of unacceptable collateral. "Make that a habit. Our doctrine will bear it better if it happens again." At the east ingress, a brood of homogorns climbs the spine of a crashed skimmer like a prayer going the wrong way. Ben sprints on a path that grows for him. A crystal ribbon laid a heartbeat ahead of his feet. He becomes 4 arms at the last step and meets the front 2 with a lift and peel, 1 hand each under each chitin chest, turning their momentum sideways into a stack that trips their own brood. He doesn't smash. He fences them with car frames he plants like stakes, making them jostle each other into a funnel. Heatblast cones a low, starving flame through the channel, hot enough to cauterize mouths, not hot enough to catch the nearby tarp market. Diamondhead caps the channel with a skylight, so the smoke climbs straight instead of rolling back into lungs. The brood dies in an orderly way that gives space back to people before it gives it to the dead. Sister hospitalers glide into the newly empty lanes and make new work for themselves. One nods at Ben as she passes, acknowledgement given to a reliable tool. On the Basilica steps, Governor Kest squares to a camera skull. "Citizens of Mega Borealis," he says, voice steady because steadiness is now a public utility. "Anchor on the Basilica. Follow PDF signs to the Undercroft shelters. The unknown ally is under my directive. You will not impede him. You will not target him. He is named Bastion." "Bastion," the crowd murmurs. And when someone yelps Xenos, the word meets the name and comes away quieter. Ben hears the name and pauses. He doesn't look up at the skulls. He looks down at the dial, listens, and goes back to work. The first victory hardens in a second arc. A Black Legion counterpush rides a rhino like a battering ram down Pilgrim's Way. The rhino is girded with chained relics, purity seals stolen and glued on upside down. A Havoc heavy bolter team kneels on its roof like a balcony orchestra. Diamondhead grows a wedge under their tracks that forces the rhino's weight into 2 rails of his choosing. 4 arms grabs both rails, braces, and hauls the ram's nose up just enough that the bolt stream takes sky instead of flesh. Heatblast draws a brief, tight line under the raised glacis. Promethium lines blister. The engine coughs and dies. The rhino slumps onto Diamondhead's wedge like a drunk onto a pew. He opens a vent in the wedge and points it toward the plaza's empty quarter. The first explosion breathes there, discreet and respectful. No one flinches who doesn't have to. A rubric marine steps out of the smoke where the Havocs were and raises a soul-torn bolter, blue and gold, like a memory of a palace. The shots cut a sculpture out of the pillar, where Ben's head was a second ago. He hears the gate before the breath. He becomes 4 arms above the rubric's line, lands on his pauldron, and twists the weapon out of its gauntlet. The marine moves wrong, too smooth, the emptiness inside the armor clicking like beads. Ben plants 1 hand on the helm and without rage, turns it a quarter turn beyond where any human neck would go. The armor locks, tries to decide whether to fall. It falls. He doesn't cheer. He doesn't have time. Warpsmith servitors clatter along a catwalk with spools of cabling meant for pylons that no longer exist. He severs the lines with a diamond comb and kicks the loose cable into a fountain he just made. Electricity seeks the shortcut, finds it, and dies with the sound of rain finding its roof. Around him, the plaza starts to look less like a kill box and more like a diagram of sense. People move as if the space invites them to safety. Soldiers move as if someone's thought about their lanes. Choirs sing, not to ward demons, but to keep each other upright. And it works. When the last of the first push breaks, the war council happens between breaths, in a nave that has become a boardroom with wounds. Kest stands with carapace vest unfastened, blood drying on his sleeve. Severin lays 3 maps over each other like scripture. Surface axis, underhive grid, sky tracks. Canoness Alessa sits rather than stands because she has lived long enough not to mince gestures. Ben steps in, human, the dial a warm coin under his palm. He looks smaller in here, under ribs of stone and saints with eyes like knives. The room looks at him like a new species of ordnance. Praise where it is due, Kest says, and he doesn't do the politeness dance first. Bastion, you saved thousands. We will remember. My men already are. They move better when you are on the field. Severin's mouth tightens in a shape that isn't disagreement but isn't worship either. He also violated 3 lines of engagement doctrine I am sworn to keep unsmudged. He prioritized a sarcophagus extraction under incoming fire. I cut a dying man free, Ben says, and it isn't defense so much as translation, which cost ordnance elsewhere that killed 2 dozen, Severin says, voice even. Doctrine exists to flatten that trade. Doctrine takes the personal out of triage. Lesser raises a hand palm up. And yet doctrine without heart becomes a factory for martyrs. Your lines are straight because someone suffers to keep them straight, Inquisitor. The people need straight lines and visible mercy. Kest nods. We cannot burn trust to feed guns. Not today. We need both to move. Severin's gaze shifts to Ben again. Your restraint in the market lanes saved 1,000 liters of promethium and 20 roofs we will need for living. Good. Keep doing that. But know this. If a spore plague shows in the Undercroft, I will not spend 5 minutes crafting a quarantine while it breeds. I will seal the doors with all inside to save the million outside. Ben breathes in once, slow. He tries to see it from the chair that wears the rosette. All the doors he has sealed, all the ones he has opened. Then tell them, he says, before you do it. Not because they deserve courtesy, because if you don't, what's left is not a city. It's a penned herd waiting for the next cull. Steel, Severin says, like calling a material. He argues steel. I argue survival, Ben says. And now he turns to Kest because the governor pays those bills. Long term. Hope is logistics. You can't run a city on fear alone. It cracks. People break and choose stupid, and stupid kills more than any swarm. Alessa leans forward. The God Emperor does not ask for stupidity. He asks for faith. Faith is not a hall pass to be cruel. You will see me cut 12 throats today, child. I will do it chanting their names, not erasing them. Severin takes that in and nods after a heartbeat. Fine, mercy with signatures. Kest points at the stacked maps. All right, here's our posture. Enemy factions. Black Legion remnant under a warpsmith. Tyrannid vanguard elements, probably synapse light probing. Necron research cell opening and closing doorways under us with professional detachment. Battle fleet holding sky corridors. Lances on call but not infinite. We have Bastion for high threat tasking and morale shaping. Morale shaping, Ben repeats, lips twitching. That's a new one. You are a living poster, Kest says, not unkind. And a lever. I will use you and lose you if the ledger demands it. My oath says I must tell you that. It also says I must try very hard to keep that day from coming. Severin gestures to his acolyte. She places a vial on the table, black wax seal, stamped with a sign that makes the skin around it itch. We recovered this off a fallen sorcerer's kit on Tower Dorsal 7. Tincture of Akashic Ash. It carries a prayer that names flames and tells them to remember their first silence. Alessa's eyebrows go up. That's a word-bearer trick. Severin shakes his head once. Worse. Thousand Suns work. Names written in numerology you can't scrub off with salt. It eats fire by asking it to be well behaved. Ben's mouth goes dry. He remembers how the storm wanted his heat to become faces. He remembers the blanks field brushing him. Your fire is vulnerable to good manners, Severin says. Your crystal to prime factors. Your strength to cancelled momentum. Translation, Kest says, spotting the confusion in the room's air like a draft. They can write polite poison, and they brought erasers for your 2 favourite tricks. That's the alarm, a Vox adept says from the gallery, hand to one earbead. New warp shape spiking from the ash. Tower Dorsal 7 again, blue and gold. Scarab occult terminators phasing with good etiquette. Severin's jaw sets. Thousand Suns. Of course they come when the crown is broken. They smell math. Strengthen your lines, Kest says. Everyone with ears brace. We're about to get lectures. Ben turns his head toward the nave mouth. He feels a wind that isn't air, a pressure that isn't weight. He hears words in a language the Omnitrix doesn't translate because it isn't on the list of languages spoken by beings who want to be understood. Alessa rises. To the steps, she says to her sisters. We will sing straight notes. He will speak crooked ones. They go. A procession that remembers how to be a procession even when it's a firing line. Ben follows and watches the sky over Pilgrim's Way swirl itself into respectable spirals. The Thousand Suns do not tear the world. They fold it with gloves on. A disc of bronze inlaid with letters like jewels settles over the tower crown. Runes awaken like polite lamps. A cadre of scarab occult terminators steps through a seam that wasn't there and won't be later. They form a half circle with their backs to the disc, patient as furniture. A figure enrobes the blue of old rivers and trim the gold of memory steps last. His mask is the face of a falcon. His staff is topped with a sun that isn't the sun. He smells like libraries and arson. Censorius Khent, Severin says under his breath. Exalted sorcerer of the Thousand Suns. Pyre cult. He burns the idea of things. Khent's voice is a sermon given in an empty amphitheatre. Children, he says to the basilica that has seen old children before. You have broken a ladder and saved yourselves a fall. Admirable. Now return to ignorance. Give me the device and the boy. Both are errors that will serve me better corrected. Ben feels the Omnitrix flinch, not because the voice is loud, but because it is correct about its own correctness. The dial is a map. The voice is a cartographer with a knife. Severin steps to the front rail, rosette bared, and delivers the line that keeps him himself. No. Khent inclines his head, as one might to a student who got an answer wrong in an interesting way. Then I will remove your tools, fire, sleep. The words don't travel as sound. They go as etiquette. Heatblast kind of heat tries, for a horrifying beat, to become good, to stand still, to not bother anyone. Ben bites the inside of his cheek, so he has a place to put pain that is his own, and slams the dial. He does not go to fire. He goes to forearms because muscles don't listen to etiquette. They listen to work. He plants his feet and lets the heat inside him be a sulk instead of a coma. He picks up a statue base and throws it, not at Khent, but at the disc. 2 scarab occult terminators shift and raise force fields with an economy a drill sergeant would be proud of. The base shatters into considered pieces that slide around the fields and land in patterns that add up to nothing. Diamondhead flows up through the nave floor and grows a screen angled to catch the return of his own shrapnel. He bristles when several shards land on it and stop as if they have been told to mind their elbows. Fine cracks spiderweb the whole sheet, not from impact, but from a math suggestion. Alessa's hymn cuts across the square, not subtle, not technical, but straight. It does not forbid, it invites. It gives the fire in Ben a reason to be awake that is not brashness. It hums in his chest like a tuning fork, and Heatblast breathes once without falling asleep. Khent tilts the staff a finger's width. Polite, he says, and then points the sun at Ben's chest. Uninvited, the ray that leaves the staff looks like nothing. It is the suggestion of absence. It paints the Omnitrix with the memory of being unmade. The dial aches, Ben stumbles. 4 arms becomes 3 for a beat as one arm refuses to remember itself. He clamps his jaw until the shape returns through stubbornness. Severin doesn't shout. He does not have to. Break his mind link, he says to his acolyte, and she fires a null rod burst at the base of the bronze disc. The burst blooms into silence that eats the polite hum for a second. The scarab occult lean into it with the grace of men walking into wind. Khent raises his free hand and writes in the air with 2 fingers. The letters he draws do not look like letters. They look like trajectories that have considered themselves. He speaks again in that very reasonable tone. Stone, remember your sieve. Diamondhead's forearm turns to a grid for a heartbeat. Holes blossom in him. He hisses and grows 2 new layers over the top, with brutal, inelegant speed. He learns to be ugly in defense of beauty. Power scaling. Interlude. Severin speaks low and fast to Kest while they watch the sorcerer move. The Omnitrix reads the room and matches forms to physics. Sentient hexes rewrite the room. Etiquette words tell fire to mind. Factor words tell crystal to reduce itself. And motion words subtract momentum from mass. Blackstone amplifies these by giving them a clean floor to stand on. Bastion must choose forms that work outside those stories. Ben takes that into his bones like a drill order. He rolls his shoulders, dials again, and lands in Diamondhead only for his calves to lace with holes. He dials again and goes to 4 arms, and the air around his fist turns viscous, a gel of denied momentum. He dials for Heatblast, and the word sleep arrives before flame. He slaps his own chest, human for a beat so the spell has nowhere to land, then back to red with a curse that belongs to no catechism. He fires at the disc instead of the sorcerer, a low, cowardly heat that creeps under the bronze edge. He aims for the runes connecting ring to reality, not the face that watches. He burns letters with a mispronunciation. The disc seam discolors. A scarab occult steps, heavy as a decision, and takes the line of heat with one palm. The metal on the gauntlet blackens, chalks, and then sloughs off to reveal intact sorceress warding beneath. Control collateral only, Kest murmurs into the net, barely audible under the music and math. Bastion, do not chase. We prove we can hold. Ben hears it. He obeys as a soldier obeys a voice that did not ask for his life lightly. Khent traces a triangle in the air and speaks a phrase with too many consonants. 3 invisible planes appear at Ben's head, knee, and hip, not cutting but miscounting. His steps don't add up. He stumbles, catching himself with a hand that should be a foot. He feels the dial's indignation and soothes it with a hand like calming a scared animal in a storm, even as he throws his weight sideways into a stone column to redistribute momentum around a new axis he chooses, not Khent. You learn, Khent says, again as if pleased. Bring me the device, and I will teach you the rest without burning your city to find the lesson. Ben's chest tightens. He has been taught by worse men, and better. The offer has shape. It is a trap that does not use spikes. He almost answers. Alessa answers for him. Voice a third rail. He is not your pupil, she says. He belongs to the people he serves. Khent's head turns, bird curious. Serve, he repeats, tasting the word. A faith word. Watch then. He points the staff at the choir. Severin fires first. The blank steps into the line of nothing, and the nothing bends away. The namer's beam has difficult manners around her. Hold, Severin says as if to a dog. It listens far enough for Alessa's hymn to climb again. The duel pauses because Khent is courteous and because he is not yet ready to risk his own heart in this debate. He has said hello. He has shown his book's first page. He writes the glyph that looks like a hand with too many fingers and closes it. The disc lifts an inch, tilts in acknowledgement and begins to withdraw. The scarab occult back into the seam in dignified order, weapons never lowering. Khent goes last. At the seam, he looks at Ben and says a single word that arrives in his ear like his own thought. Return. He steps backward and vanishes as if entering a forgotten room in a well-kept house. Silence lands imperfect. Vox beats hiss. Someone sobs once and stops. Wind finds the nave again. Kest exhales. That was a lecture, he says. He'll bring the test. Severin nods. He will not just cut. He will grade. He will attack the concept of you. Ben leans his back to a pillar. Human, because the dial clamps down like a medic shutting a clamp on a ruptured artery. He presses his palm to the face and feels the pulse inside it. He whispers, still with me. It warms his skin in answer without burning him. He closes his eyes for a second, a luxury he has not allowed himself since he saw the fracture. The debate resumes before the smoke can decide whether to be incense. You saw it, Severin says to the table, and also to the galleries, because he knows the city is listening, as all cities do. He can hurt our ally by asking the world to behave. We counter with blanks, with loud songs, with audacity. But there will be moments where mercy gets people killed. We will not have the luxury to teach the boys restraint to soldiers who have minutes to live. Kest's face hardens at boy, but he lets it pass because egos kill. Then we set rules that keep the most alive. Bastion holds civic zones and breaks conceptual threats. PDF owns lanes, sisters anchor faith. Inquisition stops naming attacks at range when possible. No one acts alone. Alessa taps 2 fingers on the table edge. And we tell the people when we must be cruel. We do not lie. We ask for their courage when we use it up. Severin's gaze returns to Ben with surgeon interest. Your devices are packed with time. It gives you moments of being more at the cost of later being less. In null fields and polite voids, the cost spikes. In warp winds, the ledger goes mad. We will rout you away from both when we can. When we cannot, you will choose the least damaging body and wear it longer than is comfortable. I know how to be uncomfortable, Ben says dry. And for a heartbeat he is 15 and making a joke at a stakeout. Because if he doesn't, he'll shake. Good, Severin says. Then we can talk about triage. They do, sharp and short, while the plaza breathes like a man coming off a run. Severin presents survival with care. We cut the underhive lift shafts with diamond to prevent Necron flanking. We leave a single gate we can watch. We create Prometheum starvation zones, so the polite fire cannot find fuel. We build sound walls to trap our own hymns and null-rod echoes where they do the most work. Tyrannid pheromone lanes we will salt with cheap chems that smell like their mother's dead. The Black Legion will be bored with how well this works. They will do something stupid. We plan for that too. Kest Steelman's mercy. We leave corridors for civilians because if you pen them, We will have riots, and riots are flanking maneuvers for panic. We coordinate with the Admiral to time-lance strikes with evacuation surges, so the sky's thunder covers their footsteps. We mark Medicae with bright shards and sacred sigils because Tyranids ignore unwounded meat, and the Black Legion likes trophies. We deny them both, and we don't shoot a man because his eyes are wrong when he might be shock or smoke sick. We put a sister between him and the crowd, and we look again. Alessa holds doctrine in two hands. Mercy without attention is vanity. Survival without reverence is cowardice. We will make our killing an act of stewardship, and our sparing an act of will. Bastion, when we tell you to burn, you will burn as little as possible as long as it is enough. I hear you, Ben says. He does. He is tired in a way that feels like a long road. An alarm chimes, not a siren, not a scream. A 3-note chime that Severin's acolytes set for a specific kind of nightmare. Signal pattern Delta 12, she says, voice in the classroom of war. Mimetic circulation vector. Phrase contagion rising in the lower habs. Trigger phrase is a 3-syllable chant in Old Low Gothic. Origin, replaying Vox. He returns. Severin closes his eyes. Of course, he seeded a word. Alessa's jaw tightens. A naming trap. Say it often enough, and it becomes a door. Ben frowns. I don't get it. Severin gestures with 2 fingers, crisp. Power of names, not mystical fluff. In this city, repeating he returns wires expectation. Expectation shapes the warp. The warp rewards attendance. Say it at the wrong angle, and you invite the person who taught you the phrase to collect his attendance. Kest is already moving. Pick skull in. Change the feed. New instruction to citizens. Replace the rumor with a counter litany. Sisters. Alessa nods, eyes gone flint. We will give them a different song. In 20 seconds, the basilica's outer screens display a simple chant in big, readable glyphs. A child could remember it. An elder could sing it without breath for a bar. We remain, we remain, we remain. Ben hears it under his ribs like a metronome. He looks up to the smoke-washed sky and imagines the word return being hunted by the word remain in alleys made of sound. A second chime. The acolyte doesn't bother with preface. Conceptual toxin detected. Targeting fires in the Manufactorum Quarter. Flames refusing to pass ignition threshold despite fuel and oxygen. Civilians trapped behind polite fire. Alessa rises without pause. Then we will be rude. They move again. Ben runs at human speed as long as he can to keep the dial quiet. At the Manufactorum Quarter, the air smells like hot oil and doilies. He slaps the dial and gets nothing for a beat. Then Heatblast hits him in a rush like repentant breath. He feels the word sleep tug at his ribs and says, no, out loud like a stubborn child. He shapes flame into fingers that pry open the etiquette on the door. It's like breaking a wax seal on a respectable letter. It pops and hisses in offended blue. People pour out. He shapes a canopy that drinks smoke without making more. He hears the word in the crowd. Return. He hears it twice, 3 times, rising like a habit. He becomes 4 arms and claps his upper hands, hard, the sound a drum. Remain, he says, and the word booms like a command from a stage. Remain, 300 throats answer, because something in them wants to be told what to do for 1 second, cleanly. The polite fire droops. He grins without teeth. Good. Now move. They do. He turns a corner, and the world greets him with blue and gold and book smell again. A rubric marine stands with a heavy flamer that writes no flame. The canister hisses. The fuel sits, reconsidering. A scarab occult raises a spear that feels like a compass needle pointing at the wrong north. Ben feels empty numbers trying to factor him. He becomes Diamondhead and makes a cover not of crystal, but of broken crystal melted into junk glass with the briefest exhale. It is less perfect. It is less vulnerable to factor words. He swims through it like a man through reeds. Khent is near. He does not appear. He insinuates. His voice arrives in Ben's inner ear again, infuriatingly companionable. You are learning improvisation. Good. It is a beginning. Ben doesn't dignify it with a reply. He slams the dial and lands in forearms with ankles like lead because the sorcerer's motion words graze his calves. He runs anyway. Strength is stubbornness first, physics second. He tears a manufactorum press free of its bolts and sets it like a door to keep a hive of clever little tyrannids in a room they cannot decide to leave. Khent tries a new line of attack because good teachers vary their drills. Boy, he says, voice a handshake he hasn't earned. Your device has a parent. The thing that made it burned a library to find the bones for it. Let me restore them to the shelves. Let me make your promise clean. Ben stops for one unwise beat in a safe corridor, made of his own glass and his own sweat. You don't get to narrate me, he says. Not here, not ever. Alessa's hymn hits a note that would break a less honest glass than his. The basilica's outer screens roll the counter-litany. The manufactorum's polite fire starts coughing in a way that is not at all polite. Severin's voice slots into Ben's ear like a blade in a scabbard. The lesson is received. The teacher is tagged. Bastion, prioritize nodes where the phrase spike is highest and Khent's geometry is heaviest. You're not chasing him. You're stepping on his chalk while he draws. Ben grins for real this time and does exactly that. Diamondhead skims across plazas and grows square shoes over sigils too clean to be random. 4 arms uproots pylons that used to be the crown and are now nice writing desks for very bad homework. Heatblast kisses edgings of bronze that the scarab occult carefully lay like borders and turns them into harmless slag. He is not fighting a man. He is fighting a syllabus. Khent escalates like a good pedagogue does when his student is stubborn. He lowers the disc not in the open, but into the underhive where the blank fields will be less tidy and the hymns will be muffled by stone that doesn't care about ethics. He brings a thing on chains made of rhetoric and gears. It looks like a furnace. It eats light that thinks too well of itself. Severin watches the readings and speaks the interlude's last sentence. He will set a null-phlogiston crucible, a furnace that burns the idea of burning. Keep Bastion out of its direct line. Use crystal and muscle to break its chains and force it to starve. On it, Ben says, and sprints for stairs that have seen saints and sinners wear them smooth. In the underhive, the air is unkind. The crucible hums like an organ warming up before a funeral. Rubric marines post like patient values around it. Chains of bronze letters anchor it to machine bones. A Cryptek watches it with academic interest, ticking a bone abacus tied to his wrist with a chain of light. Khent stands with one hand on the crucible's rim and one finger raised in a lecture anybody could learn from if they weren't trying not to die. Ben doesn't announce. He doesn't duel. That will come later and be ugly. He goes to 4 arms and does what he did in the plaza. He pulls the room sideways under the problem. He grabs the anchoring letters and twists them 90 degrees so their grammar breaks. He drives diamond wedges into the seam between crucible and reality, not to pry, but to misalign. He becomes Heatblast just enough to breathe heat into one letter that controls the rest, and not enough to wake the furnace's appetite. Khent turns his head, curious, approving. Yes, he says, like a teacher when a student finally remembers how to hold the pen. You will do. The crucible trembles as if embarrassed. Its appetite flickers. The polite void in it hesitates, unsure whether to eat the notion of eating itself. Ben finds that hesitation and widens it with crystal fingers that don't look like fingers. He becomes human for a beat and slaps the dial with his palm to reset a lock he can feel in his wrist bone. He comes out 4 arms and lifts the crucible half an inch, just enough to make its spell reach too far and fail to close the loop. Scarabs swarm. Scarab occult spears level. The Cryptek sets down his bone abacus and steps in like a clinician seeing a promising test subject mishandled by a butcher. Kest's voice gradients into Ben's ear. "We have your position. Admiral Var will knife strike the ceiling when you give the word. We will make the sorcerer mind his manners." Ben grunts, arms trembling in the controlled way a crane trembles. "On my mark." He feels the crucible's hum break rhythm. He hears Alessa's hymn above muffled by rock and duty. He tastes copper again, but it is his. He finds the instant when the polite fire admits it is tired. "Now," he says. A lance spears the ceiling a dozen meters away, not touching a soul, devastating everything else. Rubble falls in an arranged avalanche. It smashes Khent's circle without touching his body. It forces him to step back and close his hand. The crucible loses its good manners for one offended heartbeat. Heatblast is in that heartbeat like a thief through a window. He breathes rudeness into the rim. The letters lose their serifs. The chain goes sloppy. 4 arms plants all 4 feet and pulls. The crucible tips. Khent says a word that is not polite at all. The crucible spills not flame, not water, but a feeling. A cloying invitation to sit down and be quiet forever. It washes over Ben's legs and tries to name them stool. He refuses. He becomes Diamondhead from the knees down out of sheer contempt. The crucible cracks on the stone. The polite void pours out and vanishes into the rock like nothing. It leaves behind an echo that promises to be worse later. It always is. Khent looks at him for a long 2 seconds. "Very well," he says. "We will do our work in halls with better acoustics." He gestures. The scarab occult fold into shadows with an etiquette a ball at a palace would envy. The Cryptek takes one last measurement, offers a nod that holds no warmth, and phases. Khent steps backward into a seam that is an agreement with a place and is gone. Ben stands there with crystal calves and human lungs, and the dial hot under his palm. He is shaking with exertion, and with the knowledge that he is now enrolled in a class he did not choose. Severin's voice arrives like coffee. First victory secure. First ideology clash recorded. The foe knows your thesis. He will test your proofs. Kest's laughter, ragged but present. We are alive and our manufactorum is only half burned. In this hive, that is the feast day. Alessa's hymn bends into a cadence that is nearly a lullaby. "We remain," she sings, and the city sings it back. Above, the hive ship noses closer, as if offended by the lack of ceremony. Black Legion patrols realize that without a crown, they are at the party, without the invitation. Tyranids pause, sniff, and pursue other scents. Ben looks down at his hands. One is crystal, one is scarred human. Both shake. He presses them together, palm to palm, and feels the Omnitrix between them like a hot coin trying to be a heart. He breathes until it learns his pace. He walks back toward the stairs. The city above needs him to show up and not be a god about it. Khent watches from a distance, made of courtesy and malice, and writes a new page in a book whose cover is his will. He picks a duel spot that will do him proud. He chooses a hymn to break and a child to not. He chooses where to put the word return next so that Remain has to work harder. Ben reaches the nave and the council table that is a table again because grief and planning need furniture. He looks at Severin, at Kest, at Alessa, at the people who keep him between them and the dark because he keeps them between him and becoming the dark. We held, he says, and no one contradicts him. They have eyes. And we learned, Severin says, that our enemy will teach us while killing us, and our survival will depend on learning faster than the lesson arrives. Kest grips the edge of the table until his knuckles pale. We keep it simple, he says. We keep it human. We keep it moving. Alessa smiles in a way that shows too many funerals. We keep singing, loudly and with names. Ben nods. He can do that. He can be named. He can remain. He will return when he chooses, not when Khent calls. In the rafters, a servo skull drifts past the stained glass of a saint who turned away a dragon. It pauses, lens clicking. Down in the nave, a boy with a green-lit dial on his chest looks up and doesn't wave. He goes to work. The war table becomes a confession booth for ugly truths. Severin's slate shows 3 clean columns like a ledger. Thousand Suns, acquisition of the device and conversion of the operator. Black Legion, lattice reconstruction and opportunistic slaughter. Tyranids, pressure and biomass. Necron cell, study, nullification, and eventual reclamation. The Cryptek's pattern carries patient harvest. The warpsmiths carry spite. Khent's carry syllabus. Standard counters fail where the foe writes the room. Severin says, eyes dry. Bolter lines mean nothing to a man who subtracts your motion. Firewalls are helpful until polite ash tells flames to be nice. Blanks give us islands, but drown our allies' best tools when we need them most. The swarm flows around like water around a rock. We must be channels, not stones. Kest plants a finger where the Manufactorum Quarter meets the Pilgrim Lanes. We push them into predictable stupid. Choke points, bait lanes, timed evacuations under Lance Thunder. Keep Tyranids steering for meat we don't care about. Keep Black Legion irritated enough to break formation. And we never leave Khent time to set a classroom. Alessa listens and then sets a rosary on the table like another asset. We keep singing, or he will make our words his. The counter-litany works. We remain holds. We forge more. We put simple truths into mouths that want to say anything that sounds like rescue. Ben stands apart until the dial cools from a throb to a warm nudge. The Omnitrix feels petulant and tired in equal measure. He lays a palm over it in apology as Severin spreads a map of the choir towers like a fan. Khent will choose somewhere with shape, Severin says. He showed us the disc, because the disc is a routine. He will come for the Astra Telepathica choir spires, built for thought. He will ride their choir to sharpen his polite knives. Then we fight him in his classroom, Ben says. Severin doesn't nod so much as accept gravity. We fight him on the steps of the lesson, and we keep his hands off the chalk. They climb. The choir towers of Vigilus are ribbed funnels of stone and brass. Candles cling to their throats. Astropaths in grey robes sit on pallet thrones with cables running from the backs of their skulls into the walls. They hum the Astronomicon in thin voices that make the soldiers stand straighter without knowing why. The air smells like hot copper and incense that somebody with steady hands ground before dawn. Khent arrives as a courtesy. Not a tear, not a roar. The disc unfolds like a fan over the tower lip, just outside the wards. Scarab occult, set shields, like pieces of respectable furniture. A rubric rank and file fills the negative space like punctuation. Khent steps out last and skims his staff's son along the warding lines. Who names? He asks gently. Your sorry boarders. Men who die for them, Severin says, stepping to the line and bearing the rosette. And the Emperor who keeps them. Walk away, Khent. Walk away, Khent repeats, tasting it. A motion suggested. An etiquette. We disagree. The first volley is not bullets. It is a phrase. He lifts the staff and writes on the air, a neat calligraphic ribbon that reads, "Be still," in a language that has never apologized. The ribbon drapes towards Ben like a scarf someone intends to tie around his throat. He slaps the dial and chooses wrong on purpose. 4 arms lands because strength eats orders and asks for seconds. The ribbon snags on a bicep and tries to become a sling. He turns with it, wraps it around a pillar, and pulls until the words go taut and snap like overused prayer beads. Ken tilts his head, approving the attempt. "You refuse with elegance," he says. "Let's try courtesy." He raises 2 fingers. The air around Heatblast inside the dial goes soft as down. A lullaby hum slips into the Omnitrix's lattice, feathering the edges of the fire with permission to rest. He isn't telling it to sleep. He's giving it permission to avoid offense. Ben counters by not being fire. Diamondhead climbs out of 4 arms' shoulders with an indelicate crackle. Armor stacking, facets refusing factor. He grows a visor and leaves a slot in it for the world. He feels the coefficients trying to become even numbers he didn't assign, and changes shape at a microsecond beat. Ribs migrating, edges refusing to settle long enough to be rounded. "Hold the line," Alessa calls back to the sisters, who form an aisle behind her. "Sing clean, sing the long note." The hymn rises. The polite pressure stutters. Ben uses the stutter the way a thief uses a window someone forgot to latch. Not to steal, but to go through. He throws a diamond fan at the scarab occult to left and right. Not to kill, but to make their shields turn. 4 arms follows the fan, grabs 2 shields by their rims, and claps them together around nothing. For a second, the politesse collapses, a curtain caught at the edges. Ken points a staff's son at the Omnitrix with the precision of someone correcting handwriting. The beam lands like a rule across knuckles. Ben feels the dial burn cold, worse than heat, a path of ice across a nerve. 4 arms loses the memory of what elbow means. Diamondhead spurts floors. Heatblast, coaxed, almost puts himself to bed. "Stop teaching my heart to sit." Ben snarls through his teeth and slams the dial again to human for a beat. A trick he has learned. Let the blow pass into skin. That can take being insulted. Ken sees it and smiles behind the falcon mask. Clever. Open palm. He whispers and draws a glyph that looks like a hand and a cage at once. It rests on the dial like a brand, invisible to most eyes, painfully obvious in Ben's chest. The Omnitrix takes the glyph into its glass like a bad idea folding into a good friend's voice. The dial's light kinks. He can still move. He cannot leave the stage. "Ben," Severin says in the tight band vox that lives under the world, "stay north of the blank. If she steps in front of that mark, you'll lose it." "I'm losing it now," Ben says, and then stops talking, because he needs those words for his bones. He charges, not stylish, just honest. 4 arms into scarab occult, hands on the edges of reality, heaving. Diamondhead into polite mathematics, drowning it in uglier geometry. Heatblast scanning for places where courtesy frays under pressure and setting little, rascally fires that offend on purpose. He keeps moving so the brand has to chase him across his own chest. Kent draws a triangle and a circle. Momentum subtracts from his left leg. Factorization asks his right shoulder to become a lattice and forget it ever lifted a friend out of a cup fire. Etiquette suggests heat, not try so hard. Ben eats the pain. He refuses the math. He insults the manners. "Last page," Ken says, almost kindly. "Fire. Remember your first silence." The Akashic ash. Severin warned of drops from Ken's sleeve like at the end of a sentence. It drifts toward the Omnitrix, grains greedy to write the device's origin story back onto itself where it can't argue. Ben moves to avoid, and the air moves with the ash. He cannot not be where the ash intends. It settles in the green, like forgiveness arriving unasked. The dial screams. The heat inside Ben collapses not to zero, but to obedience. Diamondhead's facets begin resolving to prime factors, whether he wants it or not. 4-armed stride shortens, as if the road suddenly insists on etiquette. He staggers, and in that stagger, Khent draws the jewel's wound channel as if drawing a bath for a child. Patient, full, warm with logic. "You are a map," he says soft. "I have given you a correct legend. You will not wander." Ben sees the path the sorcerer paints for him. Fire that does not offend. Blast that does not vary. Strength that does not bruise. A city saved to death by courtesy. He hates it. He understands it. He wants it for the 5 minutes it would make everything easy. "Say it," Khent invites. "Say yes." "Go to hell," Ben says. And it is not a quip. It is a direction. He reaches for the dial, and the brand bites his palm through the glass. 4 arms becomes 2 for a second, and then the second hand returns as if embarrassed. Diamondhead seals holes and then opens new ones like a man in the wrong story. Heatblast tries to yawn. He refuses again. He refuses until refusal becomes his breath. He takes the Ashes story and breaks it with a peasant's tool. A mistake. He dials to Heatblast while the brand says not to, but he doesn't go all the way. He goes halfway. His skin becomes ember-lit. His bones stay boy. He burns with the indignity of a candle in daylight. It is ugly, inefficient, and a sin against taste. It works. The Ashes narrative wants clean. Ben offers smear. The brand flares, offended. The dial hurts enough that he bites through the inside of his cheek to stop screaming. 4 arms takes the scream into his bag and puts it into a punch. Diamondhead does not confess to the Ash that he is made of orders. He confesses to the city he is made of stubbornness. Heatblast stops trying to be good and becomes useful. He hits the staff, not Khent. The sun cracks, not shattered, cracked, a hairline down the face. The polite beam flickers. The world miscounts for a heartbeat. In that heartbeat, Ben rips the brand out by slamming the dial with his bleeding palm and forcing the glyph to ride his skin instead of the core. Khent steps back, because this is new. He gestures. Scarab occult spears snap to a plane meant to cut. A rubric marine points a Volkite charger and writes heat in a way Heatblast doesn't like. The brand on Ben's palm pulses. He feels something, ask him to apologize. "Not today," he whispers like a man to himself in a mirror. And barrels. The duel ends not with triumph, but with a bell. Alessa's hymn hits a pitch she should not be able to hold. The Astropath choir cranks forward 3 notches closer to the Astronomicon and pays for it with their corneas. A golden pressure fills the spire that is not heat, not sound, not smell. It is a full stop placed in a sentence that intended to run on. Candles stand taller. The polite hexes shiver like guilty dogs. Ken looks up. He feels it for what it is. Not a weapon, a witness. "Ah," he says without bitterness. He looks this way. A flare of light slides through Ben's chest without asking first. It touches the Omnitrix like a father who has been away too long touching a toy he once bought his child. The brand sizzles. The ash recoils. Ben drops to one knee because no part of him is built to carry this kind of daylight. "Hold," Severin grates, because men like him tell even holy things where to stand. Hold and do not speak. The light obeys neither Severin nor Khent. It is not there to instruct. It is there to say, "Seen." Khent inclines his head to the spire's apex. "As you wish," he says, as if someone politely asked him to leave. "We will reconvene in a quieter hall." He draws a square in the air. It closes like a door. The scarab occult fold backward into a seam that does not cut. It dismisses. The disc lifts, The polite letters blush and vanish, and the spire is left with candle smoke and the ringing muscle ache of prayer. Ben stares at his hand. The brand sits burned into his palm, a falcon-headed sigil made of little neat lines that will not wash out. The Omnitrix's glass is unbroken. The dial's light is steady. The cost is inside. Codex. Note. Akashic Ash. Distillate of rubric ritual. Writes first principle manners onto a target's concept. Break with ugly improvisation or sanctified witness, never with forcing key. He rises on his second try, which is acceptable in a world like this. The sisters pull wounded astropaths into layrooms and replace their blindfolds with linen that smells like vinegar. Alessa's hymn gentles without quitting. Kest breathes again, like a man who has been underwater just long enough to argue with himself. You did not kill him, Severin says. Neither reproach nor praise. He did not kill me, Ben answers. And neither do they hang medals for that. They triage the spire and make decisions in the shadow of the new wound. The brand on Ben's palm is not just a mark, it is a behavior. Every time he reaches for the dial, it asks him if he would prefer to be polite. It offers neatness. It promises safety. It implies that a city saved by manners is better than a city saved by mess. The temptation arrives dressed as kindness. Khent returns as a whisper under 3 conversations. Severin to an acolyte about null rod placement. Kest to a Vox officer about gate sequencing. Alessa to a sister about the names of the dead. It is not a voice, not now. It is a certainty that a man like him wears like perfume. I can make you clean, the certainty says, leaking through the brand. Your fire will never stray to a curtain. Your crystal will never splinter indoors. Your strength will never bruise an innocent arm. Your city will love you for not frightening it when you save it. You will go home with a device that never hurts by accident again. Your paradox would approve. Your grandfather would rest. Say yes, and I will pour the ash away, and you can keep being a saint people don't have to forgive. Ben's hand shakes, and he hates that it does. He thinks of a skull-faced man trapped in a hell-brute sarcophagus, saying thank you with air he had no right to after so long. He thinks of a child laughing at a dead gargoyle, and then hiding, because he remembered to be afraid. He thinks of promethium canisters suspended in glass that was not there. He thinks of Lysa lying to her son, that it's a drill, and then deciding to never lie about sirens again. He looks at Alessa. She is binding a choir boy's eyes and whispering a name that is not his, because she does not know it yet, but says it out of hope. You, Anders, you remain. She glances up at Ben. Their eyes meet. Her mouth moves, shaping one word without making a sound. Choose. He refuses politely at first, because manners can be weapons too. No, thank you, he says inside his chest. The brand warms with disappointment and then cools with condescension. You will reconsider when a door burns and a child inside doesn't. He makes his refusal a vow because vows are how you turn air into walls. I choose mess, he says. I choose risk and apology and adjustment. I choose a city alive enough to forgive me when I get it wrong. I choose a dial that bites me when I ask too much. I choose people who don't fall asleep when asked nicely. The brand stops speaking. It does not vanish. It waits. Price comes in the next hour like a bill set under a plate during service. Tyrannid organisms press a new vector. Raveners tunneling up under the choir tower's foundation like rats with cathedral tastes. Ben leaps to meet them and misjudges a step, because the brand helps his left foot be considerate in crowd spaces. He lands a half beat off, and his diamond visor catches a different angle. His cheek opens along a prime that should not exist in a shape he chose. He bleeds. He is human for an instant too long, because the Omnitrix, having been insulted by the brand, and then by his impoliteness, sulks. A ravener's scythe finds his shoulder meat and sticks there with an ugly efficiency that is less the beast's fault than the world's frequency today. 4 arms pulls the scythe out with a noise that hurts witnesses. Heatblast cauterizes the wound with a breath he shapes into a needle and bears the smell as penance. They hold the tower. They lose 2 astropaths. Alessa says their names into the nave, so the city has something to put under its ribs. Kest marks a list with a pencil, as if the graphite were paying for his life. Severin rips a sleeve and ties it around the blank's wrist himself, because she is shaking and pretending not to be. The sacred intervention returns not as a weapon, but as administration. The astropath choir, all but blinded, hears a taste like metal and sunrise. One of them opens her mouth and speaks a not voice into Severin's inner ear. A brief fraction of the Astronomicon delivered with bureaucratic indifference to wonder. "Bring the tool," she says in 3 voices layered. "Sanction the operator. Decide under the throne. Do not pretend to be more than you are." Severin waits for the tremor to leave his left hand. It leaves his right first. He nods once as if he were simply acknowledging a supply list. "We have our mandate," he tells Kest and Alessa, and after a breath, "Ben, we will evacuate by a fleet corridor when we have made it survivable. We go to Terra, or Ophelia, 7th. If the fleet decides the throne is too far, the supreme authority will judge, and we will accept it." Kest looks as if someone has put an extra brick in his pocket. "You will be leaving my city with its morale engine. People will panic. People will say we were saved and then abandoned by our saint. Alessa's mouth is a line. Then we will make the leaving holy. We will make it a procession with names and pictures. We will walk him to the pad with flags, not sneaking him out a side door like a thief." Severin's mouth ticks in his almost smile. It also denies the Black Legion an ambush by making it obvious. Sometimes pageantry is tactics. Ben hears terror like a word in a different register. He has heard it before in badly photocopied pamphlets. He never believed, and in the eyes of people who believe in something, singular. He thinks of meeting a king who lives forever, on a chair made of dying. He thinks of letting someone else tell him what he is to be. He is not used to it. He has teachers. He does not have sovereigns. The price doesn't stop with his blood. It shakes his ethics like a house. A manufactorum section catches wrong fire again, and this time the counter-litany doesn't take, because the crowd speaks remain, like a word they were told to use, not like something they picked. He has to burn a door with a child behind it, because the polite layer won't peel any other way. He does it with tears. He will later blame on smoke. The child runs out, wrapped in a sister's cloak that used to be a banner. The brand in his palm throbs in triumph, and then shuts up quickly when Alessa looks at it, because even brands know shame. Severin does not posture when choices like that foul the air. He holds Ben's eyes long enough for the boy to see that he is seen and not hated. "We count," he says evenly, "and we do the better number again tomorrow." The duel's mud trails through their days and into their nights, if nights are a thing you can have under a war. Khent does not always show face. He's a syllabus more often than he is a man. Ben feels the brand tug when he passes certain corners where a neat square has been drawn in chalk. He feels his heat want to behave when he enters quiet rooms. He laughs without humor and chooses to bang pans in those rooms instead. The Necron Cryptek comes back with a polite note of his own and puts a null cone on a street where a Medicare column must pass. Frocks on the storm's edge stir like vultures remembering they have jobs. The warpsmith limps across Vox and promises a tooth with Ben's name on it, forged out of pylon scrap. The hive ship rolls, insulted by not being the center of attention, and launches spores that smell like resignation. Ben holds. He hurts. He learns to time human beats between alien ones to let the dial breathe around the brand. He stops trying to be perfect. He accepts apologies and brings them back like tools. He gets better at small miracles and worse at heroics, which is a good trade in cities. It is not enough to keep the war in place. On the third day, if days can be counted when the sky is all the same grey, Khent calls a sermon at the edge of the Hap terraces with voice and fire that are both too clean. He speaks to crowds he has no right to, about a way of saving that does not involve earnest boys sweating into dials. He promises rescue you can respect yourself after. He puts words in the air that make sense even if you are not a traitor. That is the danger. Ben and Alessa come with a squad of PDF who look like they slept with their boots on and their commandments in their teeth. Severin watches from a balcony with a null rod stuck in the back of his belt and a prayer he will not admit to. Khent stands on a disc that hangs just over the heads of men who have to take stairs. He's exquisite. He names return in a way that is almost resource planning. He exposes doctrines and he makes remain sound like sitting on your hands while a house burns politely. Give me the device, he says to the city, not to Ben. Save yourselves from accidental saints. We can do this with fillable forms. We can do this without tears. The crowd leans. The brand pulses. The Omnitrix hums like a throat that wants to clear itself to be respectful in a library. Ben straightens his spine until it aches. He speaks without amplification, and somehow everyone hears, because everyone wants to know they're allowed to. Saints are accidental, he says. That's the point. Plan for the mistakes. Forgive them. Make better ones. I won't be polite about living. I won't give your math the keys to my friends. Khent inclines his head, as if Ben has debated well. Then he flicks 2 fingers at a sister in the front rank and says a small word that turns her heart into a statistic. She drops in quiet. No blood. No mess. He looks at Ben without malice. Mercy kills, he says, as if noting a property of glass. Ben's face goes white, then red. The dial's light swells like a wake. He steps, and the brand bites his palm like he slapped a hot plate. He dials anyway. Heatblast comes out loud and coarse, an insult to every etiquette the past hour tried to teach him. He lashes a stripe across the disc's edge and the bronze folds in surprise. Khent missteps for the first time since he put on his mask. Alessa's blade lights like a long memory, and she vaults a body to cut a rubric marine from collar to hip. The PDF squad fires with grief like sand in their eyes. Khent recovers by becoming more teacher than killer. He writes a circle on the very air of Ben's breath and names it Harbour. Heat tries to dock there. Ben gives it nowhere to tie. He dials to 4 arms and rips a retaining wall out of the terrace to deny the disc a place to rest. He dials to Diamondhead and grows a shape out of ugliness that the geometry finds distasteful and leaves alone. An astropath in the back of the crowd opens his mouth to scream a warning, and a golden filament snaps from his tongue to the pinnacle of the nearest spire. Severin feels it like a toothache in the rosette. Alessa hears it like a memory of warmth under a blanket as a child. Ben tastes sun. The light comes again, not blazing, not shouting, merely insisting on its place. Khent goes very still. He feels the hand on his wrist that no one else can see. He steps away with grace. Enough, he says. And this time the word is his, and not a spell. We will finish where words fail. He gestures. The disc lifts. The sermon ends. The sister lies with eyes empty but face composed because she died with her muscles well trained. Alessa kneels by her and speaks her name to put in the nave. Sister Elder, you remain. Severin closes his eyes briefly and then opens them because he is not paid to close them. He looks at Ben. Ben is swaying like a bridge in a gale. The brand on his palm is brighter than it was this morning. He's out of tidy refusals. He's full of pain and something like rage that he does not let touch the edges of his eyes where children can see. "We go," Severin says, before he turns pages faster than we can scan them. The fleet corridor opens in 6 hours. The hive ship is trying a vector shift. Admiral Var will spank it. The warpsmith is laying a trap at the shuttle ramp. We will spring it and call him a fool. The Cryptek will attend as a peer reviewer. The Emperor will watch. He has already told us the assignment. We go. Kest nods once and finds a mic. His voice rides the basilica network like a carriage that smells like bread. "Citizens," he says, "we will walk Bastian to his ship. We will not kneel. We will not throw flowers. We will look him in the eye without asking him to be more than he is. We will say thank you and mean it like adults." Alessa chooses banners, not many, not gaudy. She puts the names of the dead on them in chalk, because chalk is for teachers, and this is a lesson. She chooses hymns that are mostly lists of things that remain. Ovens, old men's hands, stitches, the number of streetcars left on their rails and working. Ben takes a breath that hurts and puts his hand on the Omnitrix. He whispers to the dial, to himself, to the light that watched him and didn't tell him what to do. "We'll go see your boss," he says. "We'll ask for permission to keep doing this messy. If we don't get it, I'll find a way anyway. But I'll ask." The brand warms with scorn. The dial warms with agreement. He smiles with half a mouth because the other half doesn't trust his face yet. They step out into a city, learning to be a parade in wartime. The PDF march with scuffed boots. The sisters sing like carpenters. Civilians line the lane with bread and tools, not flowers. A child holds up a drawing of a crystal canopy catching rain and grins like he drew it himself. A medicae with oil on her cheek nods at Ben, the way people nod at bridges. The warpsmith springs his trap because men like him have only so many moves. Servo filaments explode from the deck seams as Ben passes into the shuttle run, arcing for the dial like spokes for a hub. The filaments carry residue of the crown's math, oily courtesy cut with spite. They mean to lash the Omnitrix and slide it off his wrist like a wedding ring off a corpse. Ben is ready because Severin told him to be, and because the brand taught him what courtesy feels like on the skin. He dials and lands halfway again. Crystal wrists over human tendons, fire in the veins only. He lets the filaments land and burns the courtesies off them with a heat that doesn't set anything else on fire. 4 arms grabs the coils and ties them into a knot a priest couldn't untie at a wedding gone wrong. He throws the knot at the warpsmith's chest. The warpsmith takes it like a man too proud not to, and his legs go out from under him in a skitter of sparks. The Cryptek phases in 10 meters away like a thought someone didn't quite finish. He watches the knot burn through math and scribbles a mental note in a book made of other people's mistakes. "Useful," he says, "not to anyone present." Khent manifests not as lecture but as presence at the far end of the ramp. Mask up, eyes visible and old. He watches Ben past a sister who salutes him with her blades flat and a governor who doesn't smile, only nods. He watches Severin walk with his rosette out and his null rod in his belt and his sins in his pocket. He watches Alessa walk with her mouth moving on a list of names she will finish before she sleeps tonight, or die trying. He does not speak. He raises 2 fingers in a sign that could be benediction or promise or threat. Ben raises his palm back, bran and all, like a man showing his wounds to someone who thinks making them neat counts as healing. He does not stop walking. The shuttle bay smells like new metal and old faith. A choir of ratings in blue lines the run, and hums something that does not pretend to be art. Admiral Var stands at the foot of the shuttle ramp like a door worn smooth by use. He salutes Kest like a brother, and Alessa like a stern aunt, and Severin like a rival, who is also a partner, and Ben like a weapon he's proud of. Lanes are hot, Var says. Hiveship is sullen. I'll keep her nose up. You get to your throne. Bring back a writ I can wave at anyone who thinks my guns shoot wrong. Ben nods, then looks back once, because not looking back is a kind of courage he doesn't like. He sees a city that is filthy and hungry and alive. He sees a basilica that is a hospital, that is a parliament. He sees banners with chalk names wobble in the prop wash and stand back up when the wind dies. He steps into the shuttle. The hatch seals. The brand on his palm cools as if the absence of air flatters it. The dial under his hand hums like a heart choosing a running song. Severin sits opposite him, rosette mercifully covered again. He looks at Ben with the posture of a man about to ask a favor of a god he does not believe in. When we get there, he says, you will be asked to choose between good and good. You will be given 3 doors, each with a price. This city will be cited like a precedent. If the emperor tells you to kneel, you will kneel. If he tells you to walk away, you will walk. If he tells you to stand and be burned for a light bigger than you, you will stand. Alessa lifts a hand, not to soften it, but to shape it. You will do this with your name in your mouth, she says, and theirs on your lips. Kest, who got on at the last moment under protest that failed, because who is going to tell a governor to stay when his city is an hour from falling again, and he is its face, grins without teeth. And you will tell them that Vigilus says thank you for lending us our saint. Ben snorts because he needs to, or he will cry. I'll tell them you still owe me a pastry. I do, Kest says gravely. I will bake it myself. The shuttle lifts. A lance draws a polite line across the hive ship's maw as it yawns, and the maw shuts with a snapped teeth sulk. The disc, that is not a disc, watches from a height and withdraws into a seam somewhere vomit-coloured and ancient. Scarabs attend to the warpsmith's knot and find it rude but interesting. The Cryptek writes in a book whose pages nobody else can see. Operator insists on autonomy. Device tolerates compromise when insulted into ugliness. Predictive confidence, low. Fascination, high. Ben closes his eyes. For a sliver, he is on a roof in a universe with billboards and pizza and friends who will call him an idiot if he tries to carry everything. He opens them again to brass and black and banners and men who will never laugh at him because they will be dead before they are done being stern. The brand does not vanish. It is there, a map of a lesson he refused. It will itch every time he is tempted to make his miracles clean. It will throb when someone says please the wrong way. It will be the price he paid to have a hand at all in a place that wants them folded. Severin watches him fight the invisible swell and nods to himself like a man who has seen too many boys swallow their pain and turn it into knives for later. He looks out the shuttle's narrow window as the city recedes and says a prayer he would not call a prayer. Do not let me lie to him. Do not let me make him a thing. Alessa hums, quiet so as not to disturb tired men. She changes the word remain into arrive mid-note, so no one can accuse her of being static. Kest writes names on his palm in pencil, because paper would make it too easy to wash off. The void opens. The fleet corridor is a ribbon of violence held back by math and men with better hands than fear. Then Astronomicon pulses in the distance like a heartbeat older than cities. The Omnitrix warms as if recognizing a cousin it doesn't remember meeting. Ben, Severin says, voice low. When we stand before the throne, do not expect a voice. Expect yourself reflected. Expect a choice that takes something from you that you thought you had to keep. Ben laughs once. It stays in his throat. That's most choices. Good, Severin says. Then you are ready enough. In the city they leave, the people remain. They sweep glass into the gutters Ben made for it. They hang fresh candles in the choir towers, even for blind men. A child named Anders hears his name sung correctly and decides he will be a man with clean hands and loud songs. Lisa finds a toolbox and fixes a hinge and tells her son, "This is not a drill," and he nods and checks the kettle anyway, because kettles are how boys fight war at home. In the storm above Vigilus, a shape made of wings and inevitability turns face toward terror and shrugs because something else caught its eye. On a black deck crowded with broken pylon heads, a warpsmith hammers a falcon-headed brand onto a chain he will wear around his neck and dreams of a boy screaming please into a pillow. In a tomb that forgot how to be a tomb, a Cryptek builds a small device shaped like a question no one will want to answer out loud. The shuttle slides into the big belly of a cruiser named for a saint who turned away a dragon. Ben closes his eyes and opens them on the bridge where Admiral Var stands at parade rest, because men like him think the floor notices. The Admiral gestures to a green, lit hollow that shows a path through nightmare. The path looks thin as apology. "We thread this needle," Var says. "We bleed if we snag. The throne waits. Be ready to be told yes or no by a thing that doesn't need to justify itself to us." Ben nods. The Omnitrix hums. The brand itches. He accepts all three. The cruiser turns. The city shrinks to a coin in the window, and then to a spark, and then to a remembered smell. The corridor opens ahead, teeth like equations on either side. The Astronomicon pulses in gold. Someone far away who will never speak his name watches. Ben watches back until his eyes water. He whispers to his dial, like a man to a friend at a border. "Don't make me a statue." It hums agreement. He grins and lets himself sleep for 20 breaths, which is the most he has allowed since he saw a map of endings. When he wakes, terror is a word in the speakers, and a shape in the windows, and a flaw in his bones that he did not know he had. He stands with Severin and Alessa and Kest at the front of a shuttle that will drop from a ship named for a saint who didn't win, just endured, and he sets his jaw for pageantry. Outside, gilded hulls form a road in the sky like a law written in metal. Custodes gunships hold station like rumors that are all true. The void space between them hums with null and him in equal parts. He feels the brand hiss like a drop of cold water on a forge. He feels the dial purr like a dog in sunlight. He remembers a girl named Lisa, and a boy named Anders, and a governor who promised to bake, and a sorcerer who offered to make him clean, and a priest who told him to stand and be burned, if that's what the world needs. He remembers that he is not here to be right. He is here to be useful. He is here to be an argument in a house that has hosted larger arguments than him. He squares his shoulders and chooses mess. He walks toward a door that is not a door, where a God who does not speak will look and then make a mark on a slate that other men will carry like law. He expects to hurt. He expects to kneel. He expects to stand when told, and he expects to walk away carrying a different weight than he brought. He is not afraid. He is afraid. He keeps walking. The pilgrimage starts in a hangar that smells of sanctified oil and old thunder. Servitors buckle harnesses with hands that remember better days. Medici slip between straps with vials of numb and wake. Ben sits hunched against a bulkhead, legs braced as if the deck might tilt his choices out of him. The Omnitrix hums under his palm like a held breath. The brand on his skin pulses once and goes still, as if manners have been temporarily satisfied by ceremony. Canoness Alessa stitches a man's scalp without looking at her hands. "Drink," she tells him, and the word is a sacrament. Across the aisle, A sister polishes a relic blade with motions as automatic as memory. Governor Kest writes 3 names on his cuff in pencil, rubs them out with a thumb, writes them again. Inquisitor Severin stands as if the ship must take its cue from his posture, rosette hooded, null rod strapped flat against his back under the coat. "Say it now," Alessa tells Severin without looking up. "You'll have fewer words when gold looks at you." Severin considers the virtue of silence and discards it because the boy needs plain speech more than mystery. He moves to sit opposite Ben, knees braced against the same rib. "Cost versus dogma," he says. "You did good work dirtier than you like. Dogma says it should have been cleaner. Cost says, if you try to clean it the way he offers," he glances at the brand, "you'll lose the part of you that fails and tries again. That part is why people trust you." Ben looks at the floor. He has blood on his boot that is not his, not now but earlier, and he does not plan to clean it. "If the throne says be clean," he says, voice steady and unsentimental. "Do I say no?" "You say yes," Alessa says, tightening the final knot on the scalp wound. "And then you keep your mess where it saves the most." She wipes the needle, sets it down, and meets his eyes. He does not want puppets. He wants servants who can look a dying man in the face and be human. Kest snored softly. "And governors who don't faint at the smell." "Good," Severin says. Because he doesn't speak, he shows. "We'll do the translating and live with our translations." Medici, the rating calls, and the word unknots conversations faster than any sermon. They lift. The cruiser's bones groan like a choir's low register. The ship slides into the fleet corridor, where teeth made of math and hate line either side, and men with better sleep discipline than fear hold the Geller fields like umbrellas at a funeral. The Astronomicon lays a golden thread ahead, thin as mercy and twice as strong. Ben sleeps because Alessa orders it, and because Severin looks at him the way a sergeant looks at a man who will cause trouble if he doesn't do what he's told. He dreams in clean lines that crack like old paint. In the dream, the brand is a door that opens onto a room where everything is labeled correctly. He cannot breathe there. He steps back and wakes with a jerk that makes the harness straps sing. "Better?" Kest asks, without interest in the right answer. "I dreamed about labels," Ben says. "Then we'll write new ones," Kest says, and tears the strip off the cuff where he'd written and erased the same names. They stop apologizing to each other for needing to be near. The voyage becomes a set of chapel scenes framed by steel. Ben stands in ship's chapel too. It is a box lined with tin saints and candles that gutter under the Geller hum. Sisters of silence stand as pillars. Their null is cool and terrible and kind. He steps 3 paces into their wake and feels the Omnitrix quiet. Not because it is frightened, but because nothing living shouts in a library. He bows his head to a god he does not name, but imagines as light on hands. Alessa kneels beside him and pretends not to see his jaw work. "Humility is not surrender," she says. "It's admitting you didn't build the floor." Severin spends an hour with 2 junior medicae, whose hands do not stop shaking when they set needles. He teaches them a breath that old interrogators taught him, one to slow the body when truth must go through pain. He does not mention interrogations. He says surgery and means confession, and the lesson works anyway. Kest steals 10 minutes at the ship's rail, where void shields paint auroras across a window. He talks under his breath to soldiers who are not here. He thanks them for standing where they did. He threatens to dig them up and kill them again if they show up alive in a different uniform later. He laughs once and wipes his face with his sleeve and doesn't tell anyone. On the second translation spike, the ship stutters as if insulted. Sirens climb 1 octave. Ben snaps awake with the Omnitrix burning hot under his hand and the brand on his palm bright as an eye. Translation Echo, the pilot says over the Vox. Contact in our corridor. Unknown phase signature ahead. Matching, not matching. Calculating. Severin is already moving. To the forward blister. They reach the blister as the void outside kinks like glass in a kiln. A shape extrudes out of wrong angles and goes right, as if embarrassed to be caught. It is a polyhedron the size of a lander, each face blackstone ribbed, each vertex capped with a shimmering restraint field. At its heart floats a copy of the Omnitrix dial, green and patient and very, very still. The Cryptek's voice comes over an open channel like a radio that forgot it was rusting. Mimesis Vault, designation Silex. We greet the sanctioned pilgrim. We offer optimization. Mirafo Bald arrives without blood and with all the worst kinds of courtesy. The vault's faces rotate one at a time, revealing recessed bays where Necron constructs hover like ideas waiting to be called on. Light flows along their spines in diagrams that look like bends, flares, and facets and fists. A faceted arm extrudes out of the polyhedron, crystal and muscle in a compromise that would be beautiful if it were not a theft. I can give you forms without cost, the Cryptek says mildly. We have mapped your valences. We can pin them in place. You will not need to hurt to help. You will not need to choose. You will not fatigue. You will be useful at scale. Ben's mouth is dry. The Omnitrix under his hand hums with a note that could be interest or warning. The brand on his palm cools in admiration. It is the same promise as Khent's, in a different dialect. Perfection without blood. Mastery without confession. Severin says what he always says when temptation arrives in laboratory gloves. No. Alessa raises 2 fingers. Say the price anyway. We might learn a thing. The Cryptek does not feel insulted because his emotions are as curated as his museum. Autonomy may degrade. You would choose rarely. Your forms would be loaded with answers. The system will smooth you to avoid inefficiency, but you will save more in the ruin of worlds. It is arithmetic. Kest leans forward until his breath fogs the blister's glass. Arithmetic never bled in the right place. He bares his teeth. Back off our road. The mimesis vault opens like a flower. A cone of null extends, not a blanket like a blank's, but a precise needle meant to thread Ben's wrist and lock the Omnitrix into a constant. Accept our custodianship, the Cryptek says, courteous as an executioner with a clean blade. Avoid judgment. We will set your mandate better than men. Ben slams the dial without looking. Heatblast leans and goes nowhere inside the null. 4 arms, takes a step and feels his mass be generously redistributed into harmlessness. Diamondhead grows a ridge and sees its primes invited to reconcile with themselves into an approved tessellation. Off the blister, Severin says, and they move because he has finally learned when to raise his voice. The vault's needle follows Ben down the corridor like a polite shadow. Geller's stress sings through the ship's bones. In the chapel, a candle guttering back to life flares up blue and then remembers itself. Alessa throws open a hatch and yanks Ben into the ship's little reliquary, where saints' bones and bayonet scabbards sit in velvet with dust on them. Sisters of Silence step forward without being told and expand their null-like skirts. The needle meets the blank's field and croons like a tuning fork. It tries to triangulate on 2 silences and fails. The vault pauses, recalibrates with the patience of a god who has time. Admiral, Severin says into his collar pin. The closest thing to a prayer he allows himself. We need a shove. Spool forward batteries to the bow. Admiral Var answers, professional annoyance carrying amusement. I can slap your suitor's hand. Brusque, the Cryptek observes, and moves to the side as if to inspect the ship's hull with aesthete curiosity. We will adjust. Ben looks up at the reliquary's low ceiling. Rust stains the corner. A saint's femur sits on a satin cushion next to a sash soaked in ancient blood. The brand on his palm hums. The dial answers. The blank's null makes both behave. What if, he says quiet, they could make me better? Better for who? Alessa asks, relentless as a catechism. For men who want to stop deciding. For machines who want to stop being corrected. For gods who want fewer surprises in their court. Or better for Lisa and Anders and the way your hands shook when you had to burn a door with a child behind it, and you pressed the heat into a needle so it wouldn't catch the curtains. He closes his eyes. Better for me, he says, because I'm tired. Then you say no, she says very gently, because tired men make gods out of anything that will forgive them. We don't get to do that. Not today. The ship shudders as forward batteries rake the side of the vault with gouts of void-hot light. Energy blooms along the black stone faces and is neatly filed away. The vault pivots like a coin on a table. You waste, the Cryptek says without heat. You will need us later. A second voice arrives. This one a whisper that tastes like parchment and feather quills and patience frayed to wires. It is not the Cryptek. It is something very old behind him. Test concluded, it says through the vault spokes. The sample resists smoothing. The sample may be of use at the throne. Stand aside. The vault closes in its facets, like the last page of a book. It slides back into phase, leaving the ship's corridor full of the taste of star metal and a faint scent of apology. Geller fields settle. The candle in the chapel steadies like a child being braved by a stern aunt. Did the thing behind him just tell him to go away? Kest asks, suddenly cheerful. Yes, Severin says. And it wanted us to know it was not the Cryptek. Log that has several puzzles I would prefer not solving today. They reach Saturn's ring road with its thickets of platforms, arrays, and fortresses that make men love math. The ship drops into formation like a penitent into a line. The pageantry begins before they see the gold. A Vox officer hands Severin a wreath of words with edges. Clearance marks received. Custodian voice. Bring the operator and his authorities to the dais. Do not bring weapons. Do not bring doubts you are not ready to surrender. Bring doubts, Alessa says, and taps the officer's mechadendrite with a knuckle. They asked for them. The solar bastion unfolds out of the dark as if a god put a hinge in space. Orbital plates bristle with guns that are disciplined enough not to stare. The golden Helios panoply glows ahead, ship spires like reliquaries in motion. When terror appears, it does not rise. It judges. The cradle of mankind comes on like a verdict. Continents and cloud bands and scars. The palace crawls over half the world like a mountain range that learned to be baroque instead of ashamed. Ben stands with his hand on the Omnitrix and his mouth set the way a man sets his jaw when he doesn't want to knock his teeth together. The brand on his palm tingles, as if told to keep quiet by a librarian. The dial hums as if trying not to embarrass him. The shuttle falls through a sky as choreographed as parade drill. Aquila pattern contrails crisscross like signatures. Macro bells toll air itself into lines. Custodes' gunships fly escort in wedges that rewrite the idea of perfection every time they bank. Sisters of Silence stand in the bays with faces like cliff faces and total lack of ornament. The landing court is a kilometre of stone polished by the boots of men who never ran. Statues taller than Hate Watch without eyelids. Vox towers play a chord you feel in your teeth more than you hear. When the hatch opens, the air is thin as authority and tastes like metal that has never seen the sea. They walk a straight lane because on Terra there are no alleys. Custodians line the path in auramite that makes Ben's skin feel underdressed. Each holds a spear that hums with menace so polite you want to apologize to it. Their faces are uncovered and look like men who never said maybe. Sisters of Silence take position behind and around, null damping even the thought of comfort. The Omnitrix quiets like a dog that learned a new command and is trying to show it remembered. The brand in Ben's palm cools into a scar. He can breathe. He cannot hide in his own light here. A robed figure steps forward. Not a priest, something rarer. A sigillite of the administratum. His chains of office looking heavier than his bones. He gestures like a man who is speaking to someone with larger gestures. The throne receives your petition. You will ascend with 2 and only 2. The remainder will wait in the chapel of supplication. Speak under your names. Hold nothing. Severin bows the exact degree required by an Inquisitor on Terra. Kael Severin, Ordo Xenos. Canoness Alessa of the Orders Militant. Operator Benjamin Tennyson, Omnitrix bearer. The sigillite does not blink at the last name. Names are weeds in his garden. Come. They pass through gates thick as gilt and sigils thin as knives. Halls the size of sports fields have been turned into corridors by bigger halls. The chapel of supplication is a nave turned sideways. Kest stops at its threshold, looks at Ben with something like envy that does not shade into meanness, and says, "We'll be here. Come back with something I can spend." "I will," Ben says. "You will try," Kest corrects. And then they clasp forearms like soldiers in a story. The ascent becomes smaller as it gets larger. They move from hangar to gallery to reliquary to stairs. So narrow Ben would hit his shoulders if he were 4 arms. Candles overmatch electric light by intent more than by output. Ben smells blood that dried when there were oceans in different places, and prayers that learned to live without being answered out loud. A gate opens on a chamber that looks like a machine pretending to be a cathedral. It thrums. It breathes. It is quiet the way deep rivers are quiet. The dais is a hill of gold whose lines are not simple. They are the sum of old ideas pressed into service. On that hill sits the corpse of an empire that refuses and refuses and refuses to lie down. The Emperor of mankind does not move. He does not need to. He does not speak. He does not have to. Sisters of Silence like myths stand in a half circle. Custodes rank at the margins without making a sound. A trio of Mechanicus Magi hums equations under their breath, terrified to misplace a digit. The Astronomican's song is a pressure behind the eyes. It is possible to be unmade here by accident. It is possible to be remade. Ben draws breath and kneels, because his legs do it without asking him. Severin kneels with the straight back of a man who will stand when told. Alessa kneels and bows her head and does not have to pretend to be devout, which is a relief after a life of pretending to be ferocious. The light touches them not like a flood, but like a fingertip. It brushes the rosette. Severin's throat closes. He thinks of every mercy he forbade and every sin he renamed to make it usable. It touches Alessa's blade. She feels the old heat when she was a girl and things were simple, and she forgives herself for missing that simpleness. It touches the Omnitrix and stops there. Ben looks up into a face that is man and map and mountain. For a heartbeat, the brand on his palm glows like a lie held up to sunlight. The Omnitrix hums and then hums in harmony. There is no voice. There is a question that is not words. It is the shape of 3 doors painted across his ribs. It is the weight of 3 paths in his mouth. Behind it is something like kindness that is unwilling to cheapen itself by speaking aloud. Severin inhales to speak and stops because this is not his line. Alessa looks at Ben and nods once. "Yes, say your name." "My name is Ben," he says, "and this room has held larger names without flinching, but it holds his like a coin it expects to be used. I brought a city. I brought my mess. I brought the choice you already know I'm going to make, and the humility to be corrected if I'm wrong. He swallows. He's tired and honest. Tell me the rules. The light turns a fraction warmer. It is not approval. It is not approval, it is attention. The Emperor does not catalogue the past. He shows it in a blink. A boy who used to be careless. An old man called Paradox, laughing as a door opened wrong. An alien on a different beach telling Ben to be good, because nobody else is going to make him. He shows Vigilus in a single inhalation. The hell brute's dying gratitude. Alessa's hymn when it should have broken her. Kest lying without shame and then choosing not to. Severin not lying when he could have saved confidence by doing it. He shows a future where the Mimesis Vault pinched the Omnitrix into a perfect gear. The city is neat and empty. The banners have numbers instead of names. He shows a future where Kent's ash took the fire out and left a respectable rescue. The city doesn't burn. It calcifies. Someone else in a different tower speaks the word return, and nobody remembers why it hurts. He does not show a future where Ben says no to everything and is swallowed by a hole shaped like pride. He does not have to. Ben can imagine it. The light presses 3 shapes against his chest like seals to test how they fit. They are not doors yet. They are weights. Severin cannot help himself. He speaks doctrine because he is made of it. Sanctioned servant, he murmurs to the cold gold, as if reminding it what it can ask. Free agent, return. He swallows the rest. Memory fade, schism, lost autonomy. The words are iron filings in his teeth. The Emperor does not nod. He paints the costs, not with mercy, with clarity. The first weight flares and is gone. The room tightens like a fist. Custodies look at Severin because he said a name aloud and then glance away, because men who stand here deserve their small lapses, and it is kind to ignore them. The light stores its decisions in silence and then passes them into Ben's bones. Not yet. Choose later. Hear the operating terms. They arrive like a drill briefing, not a sermon. Power scaling. Interlude. Under mandate, the Omnitrix will bias toward forms that minimize warp amplification. Forms that feed chaos are penalized with pain and shortened duration. Within blank fields, your shifts will be reduced to half-life, forcing human interludes. Choose those interludes with intent, not panic. Sanctified spaces will stabilize Diamondhead's primes and allow Heatblast to burn without faces. Outside them, your fire will carry whispers, unless you set beds of prayer to catch them. Time remains your fuel. Mandate adds oaths. Breaking mercy rules will lock the dial to human at the worst possible hour. The brand of Khent becomes a sensor. Use it to smell polite lies. Each time it flares, you must answer with an ugly truth. The room lets him breathe again. Ben realizes he is on all fours. Forehead touching golden grating that smells like old incense and gun oil. He sits back on his heels. Alessa's hand squeezes his shoulder with enough pressure to anchor rather than comfort. Severin's knuckles are white. He has bitten his tongue and not noticed. A custodian steps forward. He is taller than 4 arms would be in this room because the room scales dignity. His face is a map of refusal and forbearance. He speaks in a tone that is used to being obeyed and lazy about it. You have audience, you have mandate. You will reach it through judgment on Cadia's stones, Ophelia's stairs, Terror's halls. These names are metaphors. They mean, you have earned our time. Spend it. Ben stands because when men like this tell you to stand, your spine obeys first and your pride checks in later. He looks up at the corpse who refuses and says, thank you, because he was told to be rude when it saves lives, and gratitude is rude when dread is fashionable. The brand cools until it is only a scar. The Omnitrix hums a new note, not louder, clearer. The return trip to the Chapel of Supplication becomes a float through honey. The air feels heavier with rules that are suddenly helpful instead of burdensome. They exit the hall the way surgeons leave a theatre, tired, a little sick, hands clean in ways that will begin to itch later. Kest stands at the threshold with his hands jammed into his pockets because he does not know what else to do in a room like this. His face, grey, intelligent, stubborn, relaxes by an imperceptible degree when Ben nods once, short, jaw tight. "Well?" Kest asks, pretending he doesn't care. "We're going home," Ben says. "With homework." Severin smiles despite himself. "And with rules. Operating under mandate. Try to enjoy it." Alessa laughs once, like a bark. He will enjoy the parts that hurt, because he's built wrong for rest. We'll keep him honest. They do not get to leave unmolested. Terror tests even those it accepts. As they cross the second great court, a skirl of wind-turned pages atop lecterns unattended for 1,000 years. A woman with a face like stone and eyes like quiet grief steps from a side aisle. She wears no armor. She wears a plain robe the color of cathedral nights. The air pinches around her like a blank's. The Omnitrix hushes again. "You carry a map and a wound," she says to Ben. Her voice is neither cold nor warm. It is necessary. You will be asked to heal the second by using the first to draw neat borders around pain. Refuse. You will be asked to burn wrong people because your mercy woke resentment in a priest. Refuse. You will be asked to kneel for applause. Refuse. Kneel only when you must choose between being right and making right. Severin's head tilts. "Lady." She smiles at him, with a weary kindness reserved for men who can't help asking names. "Sister Superior of no order you need to know. We sweep floors after pageants." She looks back at Ben. "Reach the throne means carry what you just learned down 1,000 steps and don't drop it." She steps aside. "Go." They go. On the ramp, Admiral Var meets them with the air of a man who has been told to move mountains and has already prepared the levers. "Hive ship still sulking," he says. "Black Legion still stupid. 1,000 Suns still lecturing. Necron still measuring. Your city still standing. We thread the corridor in reverse. Any last vows you want to make where it will hurt if you break them?" Ben looks at his palm. The brand is a thin, raised line. He can feel it itch when he thinks of nice answers. He puts his hand on the Omnitrix and feels the new hum notch into place. "I will not choose clean over kind," he says. The vow makes his teeth hurt in a good way. "I will not teach my fire good manners when it needs to disobey to save a life. I will not be so polite that tyrants feel at home around me." Alessa nods once. "I will sing names, even if it costs me friends who prefer statistics." Severin's eyes flick to the rosette. He has made vows before. He chooses a small one that will be hard. "I will explain my cruelties before I commit them when there is time. I will ask forgiveness after, when there is not." Kest scratches a note on his cuff. "I will bake, and I will build those gutters wider." They lift. The fleet corridor opens like a throat clearing. The mimesis vault does not return. It has been told not to. The Astronomicon threads ahead, gold in black, impossible. A road made out of a dead man's refusal to be quiet. Mid-transit, something tries to intercept with worse manners than the Cryptek. The lights go thin. The Geller hum turns into a raw nerve. A shape the size of a cathedral slides alongside, not phase-slick, but warp-torn. A barge of flensed bronze and meat. Banners made of flayed rubric script snap along its flanks. Its prow bears a mask in the shape of a falcon skull. Censorius Khent has either bribed or killed his way into the corridor. His voice arrives in the bridge like rain in a sealed room. "Last chance, boy. You saw gold and took rules. Come take grammar. We can stop your brand from itching. We can make your history pass inspection. Severin's mouth thins. Admiral. Aloud, Var says. I can slap him, but he'll ride back like a much older dog. Alessa steps to the forward blister and sings one note. The ship learns to stand a fraction straighter. Ben touches the dial and the brand and says nothing, because what he will say will be rude, and he was told to save rude for when it matters. Khent opens a seam in the corridor like a polite man opening a door with a handkerchief so as not to smudge his gloves. Scarab occult. Step through as if arriving for a salon. Rubric marines pour like ink. The barge's prow turns toward the cruiser's belly. Heatblast answers first because some temptations deserve fire. He throws a line through the void. Narrow, precise, rude. It hits the bald bronze seam and the metal blushes and tries to apologize for existing. He leans and makes the apology a crack. Forearms anchors himself in the blister's frame and hauls like a tug to keep the crack from healing. Diamondhead throws wedges down the line like a carpenter driving pegs into a green beam. Khent raises the staff. Its sun gleams, uncracked. He writes a line of ash into space. Remember quiet, he says, soft as knives. The Omnitrix's fire flickers. The wedge primes count themselves. 4 arms pull subtracts itself. The brand warms, hungry, and then cools as something else arrives. The Astronomicon flares, and for the first time, seems to notice this tiny corridor argument. A light like rules written before words were invented turns its face for one uninterested heartbeat. The corridor's teeth remap around the barge. The seam closes without Khent's consent. His staff's sun dims by a hair only he can see. The barge yawns and finds itself a fraction out of key. He withdraws with dignity. We will continue the lesson at your home, he says, and the corridor storm steals the last word and puts it in a drawer. The Admiral exhales. That felt like a dean walking past, he says, and no one laughs because they're tired and because he's not wrong. They fall toward Vigilus as men who have been granted an exam and not yet taken it. The planet turns, the hive ship sulks, the basilica breathes. Vox lines that were left burning get picked up by exhausted hands. Kest leans into a skull camera and says, We're bringing Bastian home. He has new orders and old manners, prepared to be saved in ways that will offend someone. Ben stands at the ramp. He looks down at the city that was, is, and will be his until it kills him, or he leaves, or both. He touches the dial and the brand. The hum in his bones is different now. Less a boy's favorite song, more a metronome. He understands that his fire will burn truer in sanctified lanes, that his crystal will hold its primes if he lays names along their edges, that his strength will bruise if he lets it, that mercy denied will lock him, human at the hour he most wants to be something else. He does not feel bigger. He feels narrower. He has been given guardrails. He has been given a debt. They disembark into a city that has learned new litanies while they were gone. We remain. Weaves around. We arrive. Someone has begun chalking gutter lips with names. Children have drawn crystal canopies and labelled them with ugly handwriting. The war has not paused. It has gathered more friends. Severin steps to the basilica balcony and addresses a crowd of soldiers, saints, and men who will die in boots they slept in. Mandate received, he says. He does not say from whom because that would be gilding a lion. Bastian operates under rules. Minimize warp, maximize mercy. Choose human between swings. Accept pain as cost. Refuse polite lies, even when they are ours. Our work continues. The sorcerer will come to grade us. The machine will come to smooth us. The swarm will come to eat us. The traitor will come to gloat. We will sing. We will shoot. We will not apologize to idols when we break them. Alessa lifts her hands. Hymn, she says. The city sings. It is not beautiful, It is straight. Ben breathes in the cord and lets it be the air his forms will burn. He looks to the east where Pilgrim's Way runs like a clean vein, to the north where the Manufactorum's polite fire has been taught to mine the door, to the underhive where the Cryptek's carved cones still wait to be broken again. He feels the brand flirt with an itch when he considers clean solutions. He feels the dial push back with a new steadiness when he touches a memory of Lisa and Anders and Sister Elder. He will be intercepted by sermons, traps, appetites, and neat offers. He will be judged by men who know what gold costs. He will be watched by a light too old to care about flattery. He will be asked to set boundaries that let mercy live without making room for wolves. He will fail. He will apologize. He will correct. He will get worse at being a statue. He will get better at being a bridge. He steps off the ramp and into the lane Kest has cleared, because governors do that, or they shouldn't be governors. The city makes room. The war makes a new shape to fit him. Somewhere, Khent adjusts his syllabus and writes a test large enough to cover a plaza. Somewhere else, the Cryptek pencils a note. Mandate added. Variables constrained. Curiosity increased. Custodes' gunships lift away with the silence of doors shutting without slamming. Sisters of Silence return to edges, where they will be unpopular but necessary. Severin pockets a small strip of gold leaf that flaked off his sleeve in the hall and will never admit he brought it home. Alessa puts chalk sticks into the reliquary next to Saint's bones, because names can be relics too. Vigilus remains. It does not get quieter. It gets truer. The throne's light reaches into its alleys only as far as men carry it. Ben carries enough for now. He checks the dial. It hums in time with the basilica bells. He flexes his hand. The brand marks him as a student who refused extra credit. He grins without humor and with love. Reach the throne, he says, and means not a mountaintop but a rule. Carry the lesson down and live it where it hurts. He looks at Severin and Alessa and Kest and the city and raises his voice without asking permission. All right, let's write our mess on stone. The city does not wait for ceremony. Tyrannid capillaries pushed up through the cobbles along Pilgrim's Way, like weeds deciding to be trees. Black Legion squads circle with the patience of men promised a better fight in an hour. The Cryptek's cones glitter in alleys where prayers have not yet found corners. Above it all, a bronze disc returns to a height respectful enough to be insulting. Ben walks toward an intersection he has saved 3 times today and will save again. The Omnitrix hums with a new cadence. The brand on his palm flares when he thinks of shortcuts and cools when he chooses work. He looks at Kest, at Severin, at Alessa. He nods once. We finish this, he says, and means he will finish choosing. Khent appears without arriving. The disc is simply there, and he is on it. Staff sun uncracked by mercy. Falcon mask catching light. Scarab occult unfold behind him with chamber etiquette. Rubric marines form punctuation. He gestures toward the basilica spire and the manufactorum chimney and the underhive lift with a motion that says, he knows the geometry of Ben's day by heart. One more lesson, Khent says softly, and the word lays itself like linen over the lane. 3 questions. Answer correctly, and you may keep your toy. Answer incorrectly, and I will correct your city into something worth an archivist's time. The first question is not a spell. It is a door that opens in Ben's skull and shows him 3 rooms. The first room is a field under 2 suns where his friends once laughed. The Omnitrix is quiet. He is home, and memory fades each time he looks away from war. He sees Lysa and Anders only when he tries, and then not at all. The peace hurts worse than bleeding. The second room is a road with no other footsteps. He is free to go where doctrine points away from, and to spit in the eyes of men who would pin badges to his chest while they knife his bag. He feels the schism in his bones where faith and pragmatism tear along a seam called pride. He stands alone so often that he forgets which way the city faces when it sleeps. The third room is a hall of pages and oaths. He wears a circlet the colour of clean blood. The Omnitrix's green is ringed in thin auric script that reads like a promise made to a building. He is a servant with sanction. He can touch sanctified fire without waking faces. He can lay crystal without prime fissures if he writes names into the lines. He can be ordered, and there will be days when orders bruise. He sees them all at once, not in sequence. He feels their weight. He knows the first will steal him from the people he saved. He knows the second will save strangers by accident and friends by miracle, until a day when both fall short, and he dies with an argument that convinces nobody. He knows the third will make him bite down on his own tongue to stop a polite answer that kills a child. He stands in the lane while tyrannids scratch at stone and recogitators hum in side chapels and a governor's pencil breaks. He watches a boy on a balcony count breaths like prayers. He chooses in the time it takes that boy to reach 10. I stay, he says aloud, because vows are stronger when everyone has to live with them. Sanctioned, with rules, with a line in my mouth that says when we stop and when we burn. Not clean, not schism. Here, Khent does not flinch. He has anticipated this page. He has written note margins. Then the second question, he says, and raises 2 fingers like a man correcting posture. What do you not do? The brand sings. Ben answers before the ash can purr. I don't let fire be polite when it should be rude. I don't let crystal be perfect when it should be ugly and kind. I don't use names to pin people to neat deaths. I don't feed the warped faces. I don't lie about why I hurt, he says, and the last lands in his chest like a nail closing a box. Khent traces an invisible letter that tastes like forgiveness offered to be spent. Warm, correct enough. Third question, he says, and the staff turns until the sun points at Ben's sternum. Who judges you? Ben looks past Khent because there is always someone on the rim of your choice who thinks it is their applause you need. He looks at the basilica doors standing open wide enough for the wounded to come, and for the proud to see their own reflections in the nave floor. He looks at Severin and sees a man who will write "exceeded authority" next to his name, and then burn the page if the ledger balances. He looks at Alessa and sees a woman who will hold his face between her hands like a bowl and tell him to drink and not pretend it is wine. He looks at Kest and sees a man who will ask for pastry the day after a massacre, because that's how cities keep doors instead of gates. He twists his hand and shows Khent the brand like a man showing a scar to a sculptor. I judge me, he says. Then they do. He tilts his chin at Severin, at Alessa, at Kest. And if they say I failed, I don't hide inside gold. I fix it where I broke it. Khent inclines his head, the most he will give to a thesis that holds together under the nearest wind. Good, he says. Now the test. The disc dives like a coin dropped into a well. The scarab occult spears cut invisible planes that turn lanes into polite mazes. Rubric marines write heat that Heatblast doesn't like. A warpsmith limps in from the right with a chain of pylon teeth sewn into his chest and laughs a cough made of filings. The Cryptek phases into the underhive mouth and unfolds a cone like a flower made of please. Tyrannids push up through drains with mouths finding edges. The city goes to school. Severin's voice snaps across vox nets as if it were his hand on each man's shoulder. Sanction clause. Bastion has override in civilian lanes when Mercy Threshold 1 triggers. Children in flameside. Provided collateral remains under 10 instruments. He will log afterward. Canoness, wedge your hymn into the polite plains' hinges. Governor, move your PDFs as if the enemy is bored and we owe it a trick. Admiral, call lightning on my marks. Do not chase. We pass. Ben's dial warms with the hum that means go. He dials. He stops himself at the edge of perfection. Heatblast arrives loud and rude, flame carried in cupped palms that kiss edges and not faces. He lays beds of prayer out of chalked names along the gutters, so that when his fire trips, it lands in words and sits down like a dog that knows it won't be fed if it jumps. He pivots to Diamondhead, where sanctified lines are already drawn into the stone by hands that made them at dawn. He grows crystal along those lines and watches primes lock. Where sanctity thins, he leaves gaps on purpose and fills them with uglier glass pressed with fingerprints. The polite planes drift in to say that everything must be even. 4 arms steps into them with knees like arguments and shoulders like scaffolding and turns their nice angles into levers. He ties warpsmith filament to rubric ankles and moves the knot without letting anyone see he enjoys it. Khent writes harbour in air and offers the Omnitrix a calm place to sleep. The brand on Ben's palm flares delightedly. He slaps the dial and goes human for a beat and moves through the harbour's calm like a man under a doorframe in an earthquake. Alessa's hymn finds the harbour's edges and names them out loud, and the word remain hangs across an alley like a banner you can walk under. The Cryptek's cone seeks his wrist with interest disguised as symmetry. The blank steps into its path and the cone wobbles like a coin tossed onto a drum. Ben hits it not with fire or crystal, but with an ugly truth that the brand demands. He is afraid he will fail this city, and that fear makes his hands rude in ways the cone cannot categorize. He pushes that fear into the rim like a wedge. The cone splits a fraction. He drives Diamondhead into the fault and grows names into the break. Sister Elder, Anders, Lisa, Kest's 3, erased and redrawn. The cone becomes a reliquary for the people it meant to smooth and loses interest in smoothing. Tyranids hit his shins and find crystal there, not perfect. It cuts them and his knees both. He bleeds around the edges and turns the blood into an inconvenience by pressing his calf against a buttress until the leak clots. He finds a child under a bench and carries him with one hand, while the other lays a path that dogs Tyranid charge into a wall, like a flood steered into a culvert. Khent steps onto the basilica's 3rd stair, where the hymn is strongest. He lifts the staff and levels it at the choir. Severin fires the null rod before the gesture finishes. He has learned not to be polite. The silence chews the beam. Khent draws his hand back and laughs once because the work is interesting. He points at Ben instead. "Remember quiet," he says, ignoring the warning inside the ash. He has to try the old trick. It lands and slides like rain off oiled cloth. The brand heats and cools as Ben offers it the truth it wanted and refuses to let truth be a leash. A rubric marine traverses with the calm of a man who has never eaten again. Kest raises a PDF shield wall that would make a manual illustrator weep, then breaks it at a sharp angle to funnel civilians. He snaps, "Bastion, step," and Ben steps exactly on the beat Kest's pencil once taught him, and a lance comes down on that beat, and the rubric marine disappears into dignified steam. The warpsmith hurls the chain of pylon teeth at Ben's throat. 4 arms catches it with 2 hands and lets 2 hands bleed to hold it, while Heatblast kisses the links apart, without catching the scarf of a sister at the periphery. He throws the severed chain back. It wraps the warpsmith's head. The warpsmith falls and scrabbles against a rhetoric that does not understand what it means to die in a lane you thought you owned. Khent stops tracing in the air with fingers and traces with will. The staff's sun flares. The street forgets to be a street for a heartbeat. People stumble. candles envying breeze gutter. Ben kisses the dial with a battered palm and slams himself into crystal where a saint's fingerbone is embedded under the cobble. Sanctity climbs his arms. Prime fissures knit enough to be rude again. He pushes off and runs. The last test is not math, it is demand. Khent speaks a word quietly, and a man in the crowd points a weapon at his own stomach because Return and Remain have been fighting all morning, and his hands are tired. Ben sees the muzzle. He is too far as Heatblast would be. He is too slow as Forearms is meat. He is too brittle as Diamondhead this second. He goes human and runs with a speed that aches, shouts, "Look at me," in a voice that has never commanded a parade ground, and the man looks and sees a boy with blood on his knuckles and a green light under his ribs, and decides to live because living looks less embarrassing when the person asking you to do it is trying so hard to make it sound easy. The weapon drops. The man sobs once like vomiting. Alessa's hand is there with a blade to take it and a name to put on a banner later if she needs to. Ben hits the staff. He does not try to break the sun with force. He breathes honesty at it. "I am not polite," he says without sound. "I am not clean. I am somebody's saint because it was that or nobody's. And I am going to forgive myself for how messy it is, because otherwise I will be your student." The crack that was a hairline becomes real. The sun splinters with the sound of a good glass accidentally hit by a spoon in a kitchen full of tired love. Khent catches the falling half and makes a ward with it so clean a grave would be proud. He steps back onto the disc. He looks at Ben with something that isn't bitterness and isn't fondness. "You have chosen the harder grammar," he says. "It may save you from the footnotes that eat men." Alessa's hymn does not crescendo. It straightens. The choir holds it. The city holds it. The polite planes rescind their imitations and fold like origami set back into paper. The Cryptek's cone retracts with a plan for later. The warpsmith lies under a chain that does not know how to stop squeezing and learns again what lungs feel like. Tyrannid capillaries wither where crystal gutters have been blessed with names like stitches. Ben stands in the lane with the Omnitrix humming and the brand cooling and his breath like a bellows. He raises his palm and shows the scar. He lays his other hand on the dial. The two symbols, one green as promise, one brown-red as refusal. Touch. The hum shifts. The Omnitrix face remains what it was. Two crescents greeting. Around the glass, a thin ring of auric filigree unfolds, not covering, not claiming. A two-headed eagle, the size of a fingernail, nests at the ring's south. Its head's lowered, not in submission, in recognition. Between the crescents, threads of script etch themselves not into the glass, but into the thing behind it, where only Ben feels them. Mercy first, not last. Fire in hands, not in halls. Names before numbers. Human in blanks. Log the sin. Fix it yourself. Accept judgment. Something sweet and hot and ugly burns out of the brand and crawls out through his skin, like smoke that has been waiting in the rafters. It hurts exactly as much as it should. When it clears, the brand still marks him. It no longer speaks by itself. It will sigh when he thinks of clean answers. It will not lead. Severin steps forward without moving too fast because that will be triumph. He looks Ben in the eye the way you look at a comrade who is about to outrank you in ways no manual has paragraphs for. Boundaries, he says. Say them. Ben says them in a voice that carries because it is not trying to. I accept Ordo Xenos oversight on vectors that touch the warp. I accept Order's militant authority in sanctified zones. I accept battle fleet lanes and timing. I accept that mercy threshold 1 lets me break formation to save children and the unarmed, and I log it. I accept that a mercy threshold 2, mass casualty, lets me burn uncleanly and I confess it. I will not deploy Heatblast in hospitals, reliquaries, or hives unless names are laid. I will not let Diamondhead make perfect domes where fear wants cages. I will not use forearms to execute captives. I will not allow the mimesis vault to write my forms. I will not let polite words tell my bones how to stand. Severin nods once and touches the rosette's hood to the Omnitrix's ring. A contact that says consent, not capture. Sanction acknowledged, he says, and his voice is law because Terra said so. Break these, and I will come for you. Keep them, and I will get in the way of anyone who tries to chain you. Alessa touches the thin eagle with the tip of her blade, and I will sing your sins and your miracles with the same mouth. Kest grins like a man who has bullied the bakery into opening after curfew. And I will bake. Khent lifts the cracked sun in salute that almost hurts to see. We will return, he says, and for the first time does not make the word into a door. We will bring better pages. Your city deserves to be bored by excellence. The disc lifts. The scarab occult fold. The rubric marines go like punctuation leaving a sentence. The Cryptek steps backward into a seam with the air of a juror who found the case fascinating and intends to write a paper. The warpsmith claws the chain off his face and finds the pylon teeth have stuck in his skin. He laughs wetly and vows to grow new teeth. The hive ship turns away as if a hand that does not live in physics has turned its face to a different theatre. The lane breathes. The choir tapers to a hum that does not give permission to stop, only to rest. The people look at Ben and do not shout. They do not kneel. A boy on a balcony holds up a drawing of a green circle with a small gold ring and a wobbly bird, and the word remain, spelled wrong and grinning. Epilogue begins in things that do not look like endings. The basilica keeps a ledger next to the reliquary. It is a book no one will steal because it is too heavy to run with and too honest to sell. In it, a scribe writes, Bastion, sanctioned under Ordo Xenos. Clause Mercy the first and the second, invoked 3 times and once apiece today. Corrective hymn successful. Null rod placement revised. Sister Elder named. Anders remains. She blots the ink with sand that used to be Diamondhead and will be again. Severin convenes a clipped council in the nave while people sleep on pews. We hold lanes, he says. We salt rumors. We starve the polite places. We allow miracles where they turn fear into work. We intervene when miracles turn work into worship. We cycle Bastion on and off so the dial cools and the boy remains. We log. Alessa sits a long while with her blade point resting in her palm until a mark appears and bleeds a little. We tell mothers when we cannot open a door. We do not lie. We sing their names the next morning and put the tools in their hands so they can build a door for the next person, she says. We train our hymn to be a net, not a net to be a hymn. Kest draws new gutters, wider, with chalk he puts into children's hands. You will make this lane safe, he tells them, not as an order, but as if installing equipment. They do. The city begins to look like a place learning to be its own miracle. On a black deck, lit by candles that have never been asked for permission, a warpsmith forges a collar out of pylon tooth and whispered spite. He names it Lattice Breaker and promises to chain a boy with it. He bleeds into the mold and smiles when it stings. In a tomb that forgot how to die, a Cryptek files the mimesis vault under fail to smooth, sample identitarian. Potential use under external mandate. He drafts a thing that looks like a dial with 20 spokes and no operator. He intends to offer it to a god who likes things that don't ask questions. In a blue and gold chamber that smells like ash and libraries, Censorius Khent replaces the staff's son with a new one grown from a fever dream. He calls up an enumerator and dictates, Bastion, Vigilus, refuses correct form, adopt long game lecture, target lay teachers, reduce enthusiasm for mess, draft script, relief without saints. In the fleet corridors beyond Vigilus, other ships speak Ben's name without knowing why and decide to widen the aisles they're going to fight in. A captain tells his gunnery chief to practice hitting seams rather than faces. A sister in another hive chalks a gutter rim with names and watches a spill change direction, as if it meant to all along. Weeks pass in a place that counts time in sirens and bread. Ben learns to wear the ring without touching it. He learns to stop himself one step short of clean and one step short of cruel. He learns to let others go first. He learns to leave a lane when his human lungs begin to wheeze because the dial will not love him enough to save him from doing too much. He learns to hand the gutter chalk to Anders because the boy's lines are steadier when he pretends they're not. He moves between worlds like a courier with one parcel and infinite recipients. Cardia's stones send back their own test. A regiment who will not sing with him because they do not think that is what soldiers do. Ophelia's stares ask him if he will kneel to a doctrine when the doctrine pays for his hospital beds. Terror welcomes him to speak with a small man in a very large office about how many saints a city can handle before it eats itself. He stays brief, honest, tired. He takes the vow again when he needs to. He writes it on his palm under the brand. The symbol spreads not like a fashion, but like a datum. Green ring, thin gold circlet, small eagle that knows its place. A sergeant on Armageddon paints it on a hab gate and shoots orcs under it, because he needs to believe names can live in lanes. A Magos on Griffon 4 etches it in a cogitator's casing and polishes it once a week, and tells no one. A child on Vigilus traces it in ash on a friend's bag, and laughs when the friend pretends not to like it. Lisa builds a cupboard under the stairs that survives 6 fires and 3 floods. She keeps bread in it and a box of chalk. She tells her son to check the gutters on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and if he forgets, she hits him on the ear and then kisses his hair. Anders grows tall. He goes to funerals because the city asks him to sing a name, and he does it without wobbling the note by much. He draws a crystal canopy on a wall that has been painted and scoured 100 times, and nobody washes it off. Ben stands on Pilgrim's Way where the pylon once hummed. He is human because the dial likes the breeze, and so does he. He watches Kest argue tariffs with a man who thinks miracles should mean bread is free. He watches Severin teach a rookie acolyte to write no in 4 languages without turning it into yes by accident. He watches Alessa judge a duel with the expression of a woman, watching 2 men choose to teach each other in the worst way. He watches the sky, which is the same grey as yesterday, and refuses to apologize. He rubs his thumb over the scar on his palm. He touches the Omnitrix ring. He smiles once, small. He knows what the first path would feel like in his bones, and he knows he will never get to take it. He knows what the second would make him, and he will spend his life refusing it. He knows the third is the one he took, and will take again every morning until hands that are dirtier than they should be fold his eyes. A vox crackle from Admiral Var interrupts his reverie with bureaucratic poetry. Bastion. Dispatch request. Ecclesiarchy. World Hestia 9. Fire whispered into good manners. Need rudeness. Fleet corridor opens in 20. Ben looks at Severin. Severin raises an eyebrow that says rules. Alessa raises 2 fingers that say names. Kest pockets a pencil and says pastry when you return. Ben nods because saying go would romanticize a thing that is just his job. He dials. The green lights. The ring glows. Heat warms his ribs. Crystal rides his tendons. Muscle hooks into the day. He takes 1 step and then another, not toward glory, not away from cost, but onto the path he drew for himself, where a city can remain and arrive in the same breath.